Hey guys, welcome to my first compilation video. Today, I've put together some of the scariest stories I've read, and they all have one thing in common. At the beginning, everything seems pretty normal, pretty fine, but if you pay attention, you notice the warning signs were there right at the start. The first story today fits that theme to a T. In the beginning of the story, it's pretty chill. You can't really tell something's wrong. But the more you read, the more you realize all these little details that are warning you about what's coming. Anyways, let's get right into it. The first story today is from r/scary stories from user RJ Crane21. I bought a box of books. One of them was a woman's journal from 1953. Hey everybody, so I love to collect forgotten literature of all kinds. My house actually came with this massive built-in bookshelf when I bought it a few years ago, and it's become the home to most of my collection. Collecting these old books and things has become a bit of an obsession, but I guess it's better than crack or something. But the other day, I went to a local flea market, the best place to find whatever old relic you could possibly want, and I came across a stand that had a large cardboard box absolutely full of old books. On top was a piece of paper that said, $25 for all. I easily got the lady talked down to $15, which I was pretty proud of myself for. When I got home, I laid all the books out on my living room floor. Most of them were ones you'd expect to be in an old attic. Some farm manuals, cookbooks, a couple old church hymnals, stuff like that. But there was some other fun stuff in there. Books like Dragonwick, The Big Clock, and Peyton Place. Some pretty neat finds if you're in the same niche hobby. But there was a journal in the box as well. It has a dark, brown leather cover. It felt kind of like an old baseball glove. The opening page has a name written in neat cursive, Ruth Calloway. And even though it may be wrong to share what this lady wrote in her journal on the internet, especially someone who has probably been dead for decades, but after reading through some of it, I think it needs to be shared. So that's what this post is for. I'll be typing out her entries exactly as they are written. I just want to share the odd things that appear in this journal. Let me know what you guys think. Alright, calling it here. This book's going to be haunted. This writer is going to die. May 3rd, 1953. This morning has been very quiet. A kind of quiet that settles over the farm once the wind decides to rest for a while. I sat at the kitchen table, looking across the fields with my coffee I had made just after sunrise. The dew that rests on the grass reflected the burnt orange sunrise beautifully. I've decided to write things down again. The house had felt horribly empty the past few months, and I thought putting words to paper might help pass the long hours. Thomas always gave me grief for keeping things bottled up inside all the time. Perhaps he was right about that, as he was with most things. I go out to his grave every morning after tending to the chickens. The ground beneath that large oak is still a bit uneven, though the grass has started growing over it some. I brush away the loose dirt that tends to gather at the headstone, and I sit with him a while. I pray and speak with him. It's strange how this place felt so full of life and now suddenly feels large and hollow. The farm is struggling a bit this season, though I suppose that's nothing new. The soil seems to do as it pleases, no matter how hard a person works it. I never was much for doing the dirty work on the farm. Still, I will keep trying. Times come that I think about leaving this place, but I don't believe I could ever truly do that. Thomas always loved this land. If I were to go, it would feel as if I left him here alone. I suppose it'll just be the two of us for a while longer. May 6, 1953. The chickens were restless today. The 8 of my hens fussed and paced more than usual as I was gathering eggs. At one point, all of them went silent as they stared out of the hen house toward the cornfield. I'm unsure if it's because of the storm that the strong winds are blowing in, or if maybe I have a slimy fox prowling around. During my visit with Thomas, I noticed the grass had grown more since the last rain. At least this land has shown it can grow something. I try to be thankful for the revelation. While I was sitting there after our prayer, I noticed the wind moving toward the far end of the field, bending the tops of the stalks back and forth. But strangely, it didn't seem to reach the house or the yard around it. I sat there suddenly aware that the air felt completely still. I remember thinking how peculiar it looked. The field swayed and danced while everything around me remained quiet. It didn't last long. After a few minutes, the wind came through the yard and everything seemed to return to normal. Perhaps living in this quiet house alone has led me to simply notice small things more than before. I suppose when someone spends too much time alone, their mind begins to wander. May 7th, 1953. The storm last night has changed everything. It rolled in just as any other storm before it. I sat at the kitchen table with only my reading lantern and a book. I've never been much for storms. Thomas always knew that and would stay close to me to keep me at ease. I sat with my book, attempting to read as the loose boards of the barn smacked violently against themselves. Storms tend to have a way of making a place feel smaller. The whole house seemed to settle around me as the wind continued to push and pull against the walls. I would close my eyes from time to time, trying to imagine Thomas' hands gripping my shoulders for comfort. It must have been sometime past midnight when I first heard it. I believed it to be the wind at first, but then it came. A small sound, thin and wavering, like crying, muffled by the storm. I sat there a moment longer, listening closely. The storm was beginning to quiet, though the rain still fell steady on the roof. Then I hear it again. Crying. It was coming from outside. I took the lantern and stepped onto the porch. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle, though the air still smelled heavy and wet from the storm. Then I heard it again. There, resting beside the railing, was a bundle wrapped tightly in an old brown blanket. I can't say how long I stood there before moving. When I knelt down and pulled the blanket back, I saw the face of a newborn child staring up at me. He couldn't have been more than a few days old. As soon as I lifted him into my arms, his crying had softened, as though the warmth had comforted him. His eyes opened slowly and locked in with mine. My heart felt as if it melted completely. There were no tire tracks in the mud near the house, no footprints along the path, nothing to show how someone could have brought him here in the middle of such a storm. I stood there for a long time beneath the porch roof, listening to the rain and watching the calm begin to hit the fields after the storm. He's sleeping in a small basket near the stove while I write this. I don't know who left him here, but I can't bring myself to believe it was done by accident. May 7th, 1953. As soon as the sun rose, I grabbed the baby and made my way out to the porch to investigate. Just as I had believed last night, no footprints, no tracks. I couldn't figure out how someone would have gotten the child to the house. Am I wrong to feel unbothered by this? With there being a storm and all, I could see how it would, get rid of the tracks, Thomas and I had always wanted children. We had always dreamt of a yard full of babies. For whatever reason, the Lord must have not seen it as the right time. But now, the mysterious appearance of this child must be a sign of some kind. Tears were building in my eyes as I looked to the sky and thanked God for the immense blessing He has given me. I looked down to the sleeping baby in my arms, and the revelation hit me like nothing ever had. Samuel. My father was the one who told me the name Samuel meant that the Lord had heard someone's prayers, just as Hannah's prayers were heard in the Bible. It seemed perhaps mine have been heard as well. May 10th, 1953. Word travels quickly in a place like this. Many of the folks in town had seen Samuel and me going to the general store to get some baby supplies. Before I had even finished grabbing what I needed, Miss Pritchard and her son had spotted me near the counter. Her eyes nearly jumped from her head when she saw Samuel in my arms. She asked where he had come from. Before I could think properly, a lie about Samuel belonging to my sister in Kentucky slipped out. I said that my sister had fallen ill and she needed someone to look after the boy for a while. I don't have a sister, and lying like that made my stomach curdle. Miss Pritchard did not seem entirely convinced of my story, but she nodded and accepted all the same. Her son Todd seemed quite enamored with Samuel. His eyes were locked on him as if he was studying him. Samuel let out a small whine in my arms. Todd raised an eyebrow as he pulled on Miss Pritchard's sleeve. He talks funny. Miss Pritchard and I chuckled, and it broke the tension. By the time Sunday service began, I could feel the eyes on Samuel and me. The whispers began as soon as we entered through the doors. A widowed woman living alone does not suddenly appear with a newborn child without stirring questions. After the service had ended, a group of them gathered near the church steps, Miss Pritchard being one of them, along with old Miss Jenkins and the Williams sisters. They seemed to try their best to sound polite, though a mixture of curiosity and judgment filled their eyes. They asked about Samuel again, where he'd come from, how long he would be staying. I told them the same story. My sister, Kentucky, just until she was well again. They seemed satisfied enough with my explanation, so Samuel and I made our way to the car. As we walked, I could see Todd with a group of 4 or 5 other children. I couldn't tell what he was saying, but he was suddenly pointing his eyes in our direction. The other children would steal glances as well, some of them in awe. I looked down and could see that Samuel's eyes seemed to be glancing back at them as well. I ignored the children's glances and got Samuel and me back to the farm. May 13th, 1953. Things have really started to turn around for the better here on the farm. This morning, I went out to gather eggs from the chickens as I normally do. When I opened the door to the hen house, I nearly dropped my basket when I saw what was waiting for me. I had to count twice to be certain. 16 eggs. I find myself when I'm reading stories like this, that when is it going to get scary? What could they possibly do to make this scary? I couldn't believe it. Those hens have not produced like that since Thomas was around to tend to them properly. I stood there for a long moment, simply looking at them before gathering them into a basket. Samuel sat in the small basket I had made for him near the coop door as I worked. His quiet eyes just followed those chickens as they made their way through the yard. Afterward, I went to tend to the garden behind the house. The beans have begun sprouting far quicker than I had expected. The rows that seemed weak and on the verge of dying only a few days ago now appeared strong and bright green. Even the soil felt softer as I weeded the area around them. I even noticed that Mr. Jenkins' cornfield across the yard seemed to be fuller than I remember. Thomas used to tell me how the land can always surprise you when you least expect it. I took Samuel with me as I walked along the edge of the flourishing cornfield. The joy in my heart felt almost too great to contain. For a moment, I thought I had heard something in the field, something moving deeper in the rows as I ran my hands over the sharp leaves. Samuel grew very quiet in my arms, and I noticed his eyes were fixed deep into the rows of corn as well. But as I looked, I couldn't see anything. Just the wind and the corn. But all the same, my motherly instincts are beginning to settle in, because I brought Samuel back inside after catching Thomas up on the good news. I suppose it may be a foolish thought, but I cannot help but feel like there's something good that has come to this land. The farm just feels fuller somehow, as if the land has finally been able to breathe again. And it all seems to have stemmed from the enormous blessing that has been the presence of Samuel. May 18th, 1953. The farm's good fortune has continued these past few days. The hens have yet to slow their egg laying, and the garden has grown strong enough that I only needed to spend time keeping ahead of the weeds. Even the weeds seem to be thinning out more and more. Samuel has taken well to the fresh air. We've been going out in the evenings to check the rows one last time before sunset. The corn has now grown tall enough that the wind makes the stalks dance like long rolling waves. The sound even reminds me of the ocean Thomas had told me about after one of his trips down south. I stood there for a while watching the field wave in the wind. That's when I noticed the scarecrow. It stood far enough out that I couldn't make out many details. At first, I assumed that the farmer must have placed it out there to fend off any birds coming for his crops. I don't remember seeing it before, but there's been enough going on that I easily could have missed it. Still, something seemed strange. The wind blew heavily through the field, sending the corn swaying back and forth, yet the scarecrow did not seem to move. Not even a little. Eventually, the wind changed and the corn shifted enough that I couldn't see the scarecrow clearly from where I was standing. When I brought Samuel back into the house, I couldn't help but glance back to the field once more. For a brief moment, I could have sworn the scarecrow seemed a row or two closer, but with the dimming sunlight, I couldn't be certain. May 21st, 1953. The farm is still flourishing. The farm is flourishing too well, actually. I pulled 30 eggs from the chicken coop this morning. 30. 8 hens. It's not the worst thing, because it seems the folks around town are going through dry spells with their flocks, so I've been able to provide some eggs by setting them at the end of the drive, but it's not just their chickens. Everyone's garden seemed to have died off or are barely hanging to life, while mine, as well as Mr. Jenkins' attached field, is growing out of control. I've already been able to harvest many of my vegetables, and they've somehow started showing blossoms once again. I'm grateful for the blessings God has given me, but my prayers have turned to questions on why only me, all while the rest of the town is struggling. I believe this stress has grabbed a strong hold on me because that scarecrow seems to have moved a few rows closer to the house. I don't know why Mr. Jenkins would move it only a few rows. I wouldn't think that would make much of a difference. May 24th, 1953. Miss Pritchard stopped me after the church service again. She was asking me about what I'm doing to my garden and what I'm feeding my chickens. She was not asking curiously, she seemed to be asking in animosity. I wish I could have given her more of my attention, but I couldn't help but notice her son Todd. He was hiding behind Miss Pritchard, holding tightly to her dress. His eyes that used to look at Samuel with curiosity or even infatuation are now showing fear and unease. I look down to Samuel and his eyes are locked onto Todd. I thanked Miss Pritchard for her time, and Samuel and I made our way to the car. On the way, I saw Mr. Jenkins. He chuckled as I approached, and he joked about how we were the only ones in town who seemed to know how to grow a sprout around here. I played along, knowing I came to ask him about something very specific, the scarecrow. Mr. Jenkins says he never put up a scarecrow. Once Samuel and I arrived back at the farm, the scarecrow wasn't in the field anymore. May 26th, 1953. This morning, I brought Samuel to the porch so I could drink my coffee. As soon as we stepped outside, I noticed there was a line of flattened grass near the porch. When I went to investigate, I came to the realization that the line made a perfect circle around the house. It was as if something had been walking around the house the night before. As I was inspecting the path, I heard Samuel in his basket on the porch. He was looking towards the cornfield, smiling, laughing. I turned to face the field, and the scarecrow was back in the field. Closer. It was standing maybe a dozen rows away from the yard. I could see the shape more clearly now. It resembled a man in the broadest sense, but the proportions were wrong. It was tall and thin, almost stick-like. Okay, there we go. Its arms hanging low enough that they nearly brushed the top of the corn. Its joints seemed like they would bend in different directions, but in multiple places like a twig. The wind blew the stalks, and yet the figure remained unchanged. I realized being this close that the corn wasn't even touching the figure. It was as if the corn was bent away slightly, trying to give it space. What I had previously assumed to be clothing seems to be strips of something dark, somehow clinging to its frame. I tried to make out a face, but its head was tilted in such a way that I could not see one clearly. I stared at it, trying to figure out what strange material it had been made from. None came to mind. I started looking for the post beneath it, a wooden beam a scarecrow ought to be strung up on, but the longer I stared, the more certain I became that there was no post at all. Samuel and I have yet to go back outside. May 27th, 1953. I did not sleep well last night. I stayed up far too late washing dishes that had already been cleaned and sweeping the floor 3 times over. I kept thinking that if I stepped back outside to investigate, I could possibly find some sort of explanation. But the thought of going anywhere near that thing caused my stomach to tighten into a knot. As the evening went on, I tried to settle Samuel down for the night. The poor boy seemed restless. I'm sure the anxiety flowing through me didn't sit right for him either. The sun had almost disappeared behind the cornfield when I built up the courage to take a look outside. You couldn't have done it in the morning? The figure was still there. It did not appear that it had moved at all since the last time I saw it. I stood there for several minutes, watching through the window. That's when Samuel began to fuss in his basket. It wasn't a cry, but almost a low humming noise. I nearly dropped the curtain when I noticed the figure beginning to move. It didn't walk like another human would. Instead, it folded itself forward through the corn, slow and deliberate, as if a folding ladder were alive and moving through the corn. First, it leaned its long torso too far forward. Then one of its legs bent at an odd angle, and suddenly the rest of its body was several rows closer. It folded again and again. Once it got just inside of the yard, it stopped, now disturbingly still. It seems to be almost 10 feet tall. I couldn't see its face at first. That was until the long curve of its neck leaned in closer. Its face was missing any discernible features. It had indents of eyes, a nose, and mouth. But there were no details, as if someone had begun forming a face from clay but was not able to finish. Samuel began giggling and cooing in his basket. The figure stopped moving as soon as the laughing began. Suddenly, the figure lowered itself. Slowly, its long limbs folded beneath it until it rested on the ground. It stayed there for several minutes, completely still, almost as if it was kneeling. It was close enough now that I could see that its skin was gray and smooth, almost like rubber stretched around something underneath. And it had these black, thin, leathery strands hanging off of it, rustling softly with the wind. Samuel eventually grew quiet and fell asleep. When I turned back to the figure, it had resumed standing. It didn't seem to be interested in coming any closer. It was as if it was waiting. I wrapped Samuel in my arms and we sat together in Thomas' television chair. I had not sat in that chair since Thomas passed. I just sat there and held Samuel, trying to remain calm until morning. When morning came, I looked back out the window. The same figure was in its place, but behind it, scattered through the corn, stood dozens more of the figures, all facing the house. They all looked very similar to the original, yet they had their own unique qualities. Whether it was different places or directions, their limbs bent. Some had more or less of the leathery strands flowing in the wind. The view is both mesmerizing and terrifying. May 29th, 1953. None of them have moved, at least as far as I can tell. Samuel and I had a different group of visitors today. This morning, the yard began to fill with some of the vehicles from town, cars and trucks pulling in with purpose. Miss Pritchard, a few other farmers, and even Sheriff Jed. They gathered near the porch yelling and screaming about how I must have poisoned their fields or am doing something illegal to my garden in order for it to flourish the way it has. I did not dare to step outside, but I looked across the house to see if the figure was still standing in the yard. The mob of people must have noticed my glance and they followed suit. When they saw the figure, I had a feeling of relief come across me, because that means I have not lost my mind, but also a feeling of fear grew inside my gut. Sheriff Jed took the lead as the group of them stepped to the corner of the house for a better view. Their whispers and questions were not loud enough for me to make out, but the gasps when the figure took a slow folding step were discernible. The sheriff quickly raised his gun and fired a single shot at the figure. It didn't flinch, though the sound of the gun made Samuel begin to cry. Suddenly, the figure folded forward rapidly across the yard, covering distance much faster than before. The crowd scattered to the cars and began speeding out to get away, but the figure was able to catch one of the farmer's trucks before he made it off the property. Its long, scrawny arm wrapped underneath and all the way around the cab of the truck. The metal collapsed with an awful grinding sound until the entire cab looked like nothing but a crushed tin can. Even through the scene before me, I realized that Samuel had stopped crying. The figure placed the destroyed truck down and in its originally deliberate pace, folded its way back to its place in the yard. Once it settled in its desired location, I saw something else. The rest of the figures in the field began to fold closer to the house until they were all at the edge of the corn. May 31st, 1953. The townfolk have not returned. The road out in front of the farm has remained empty as well, but I know that word has to have spread fast about what happened here. The farmer's truck remains in the yard where the figure had crushed it. The figures have not left either. They stand at the edge of the corn, sun up to sundown. I counted 37 of them at sunset. By the time the sun came up again, there were more. They have not wandered, they have not spoke. They simply faced the house, watching. Samuel slept for most of yesterday. He had been strangely calm the last couple of days. Once he woke this morning, I carried him to the window so he could feel some of the afternoon sun. The moment he looked to the field, the figures began to move. Not toward the house, downward. One by one, they fell into that kneeling pose that the first one performed a few days ago. Samuel let out a joyful laugh at the sight before us. I should have been frightened by the disturbing nature of so many of those things kneeling in the field, but instead I felt something else. Relief. Almost as if I was beginning to understand what they are. At the very least, understand that they have not come to harm my sweet Samuel. Just after sunset, I could hear movement outside. When I looked out the window, I saw that several of the figures had moved closer throughout the yard. Almost all of them are out of the field now. A few by the barn, one by the oak tree where Thomas' grave lies, and the first figure stands outside Samuel's window. Samuel was laying in his crib looking out at them, reaching for the glass, laughing. I do not believe that these figures have come for the farm, or the land, or even me. I believe they came here for Samuel, possibly even sent by God. But tonight, for the first time, I think I understand something else. They haven't gathered here to take Samuel. They're waiting. That's the final journal entry. There's nothing else after May 31st. No explanation as to what happened to Ruth or Samuel. I tried doing a Google search on them, but I really couldn't find much other than a farmhouse fire in the early 60s outside of town. One other thing I noticed when I finished reading, the back pages have impressions on them, as if someone had written on one of the pages extremely hard. I couldn't quite make them out at first, but I think I figured it out. It looks like someone wrote the same sentence over and over again. They are still here. This one really leaves the ending up to imagination. The way that all the figures kneeled to Samuel like he was their leader. What are they waiting on? King Samuel, leader of the Slendermen of the Corn. This next story, the beginning, is just too good to be true. Which I guess that says enough, but like I said, just look for those little details because they're there. The next story today is from r/nosleep from user accomplishedlow7889. I found the perfect apartment in the city. Something in it is stealing my life. Oh my gosh. Everyone's always looking for that perfect place. Big enough, not too expensive, close to work. Somehow I actually found it. The building itself was old, the kind with narrow hallways and a slow elevator that always made a faint noise on the way up. But it was well kept, clean and quiet in a way that's hard to find in a city like this. The landlady lived in the same building, 3 floors above me. She was a tall, older woman with a soft voice and tight shoulders, and seemed genuinely pleased to show me the apartment. It had 2 bedrooms, a big living room, and 1 balcony. It was also just a few blocks from the office, which meant I could walk to work every morning instead of dealing with packed trains. I walked through each room expecting there to be a catch. I had just graduated and still had student loans to deal with, so there was no way I should be able to afford something like that. But when she told me the rent, I just stood there for a second. She explained she gives a big discount to young women who are new to the city because she had been one herself once, and I didn't question it. I signed the lease the same day. Moving in felt good. My dad helped me bring stuff over and fix a few small things, and for the first time, it felt like I was actually starting my life. The only strange thing that first night was when I dropped the toolbox on my foot and cut the side of my big toe pretty badly. I cleaned it, put a bandage on it, and figured I'd take a better look the next day. But when I woke up, the cut was already gone, like it had happened a long time ago. The first month felt perfect. I used to sit on the balcony every morning, eating scrambled eggs and drinking coffee before walking to work. I was in my early 20s, living in the biggest city I'd ever seen, with a job I actually liked. And it felt like everything had finally worked out. The apartment was a big part of that. The first time something felt off was after a night out drinking with coworkers. I got home, opened Instagram, and saw a picture of myself from earlier that night, and I looked different. Nothing obvious, just older. My face looked a little more tired, my skin dull, with faint dark circles under my eyes. I even pulled up older photos to compare. Same angle, same smile, but it didn't look like the same person. I didn't think much of it at first, but over the next week, it got harder to ignore. My skin got drier. I started waking up exhausted, no matter how much I slept. And one morning at work, I couldn't stop yawning during a meeting. Later that day, during a presentation, I felt this weird pain in my back. At first, I thought it was just stress. My first real job, new city, new routine, it made sense. I went to a doctor just to be safe, and he confirmed it was probably fatigue, so I kept going. Day after day, I started getting used to feeling like that. I went out less, stopped going to the gym, and most nights I just stayed in watching random shows. Every month, I'd slide the rent under the landlady's door like we agreed. I almost never saw her after the first week, and she never reached out. About 2 months after moving in, I found my first gray hair. It was a Sunday morning, and I was brushing my hair while listening to some podcast when I saw it. It honestly freaked me out. After that, things got worse fast. My coworkers started noticing. My face looked thinner, my skin dry and lifeless, and I must have lost over 20 pounds without even trying. The gray hairs kept multiplying. My boss even called me into his office and asked if everything was okay, if I needed some time off. I didn't even know what to tell him. Every doctor I'd seen kept saying the same thing. Stress, burnout, something like that, but the truth was I wasn't even working that hard. Then Thanksgiving came up, and I decided to visit my parents back home because I couldn't wait to get out of that city. I kept thinking maybe I just needed that break. And for one day, I believed that was it. The first night back in my old room, my skin already looked better. I had energy again, and I felt like myself. But my parents didn't see it that way. They looked at me like they were seeing a different person, like they didn't recognize me anymore. And the worst part came when I stood next to my mom in the bathroom mirror. We looked the same age. That's when I knew it wasn't just stress. I ended up staying there for 2 weeks, and when I went back to the apartment, I already knew something in that place had changed me for good. The second I walked in, I started packing. I grabbed everything I could, threw it into 2 suitcases, and rushed to the elevator. There was another woman inside. A woman tall, athletic, wearing workout clothes and sunglasses, even indoors. She looked like she was in her early 20s. Ooh, that's the old landlord lady. I barely paid attention to her at first. Then I looked again. Something about her felt familiar. The way she walked, the way she kept her shoulders tight, the shape of her face. I kept staring, trying to place it. And then it hit me. She looked exactly like the landlady, only decades younger. I stared at her longer than I should have, and she noticed. She turned away quickly and tried to step out as soon as the elevator reached the ground floor, but I didn't let her. I grabbed her arm and turned her toward me. I didn't need her to say anything. I already knew. It was the landlady. I started yelling at her, asking what she had done to me. She tried to pull away, but I wouldn't let go, and we ended up fighting right there in the lobby. Of course, she was now much stronger than me. Much, much stronger. And she shoved me hard enough that I fell and hit the back of my head on the floor. I don't remember losing consciousness. It just felt like everything cut out. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room, with bright lights and nurses moving around at bedside, and the landlady sitting next to my bed. She looked guilty, almost sad. She apologized for pushing me and said she didn't have a choice, but I didn't care about that. I just wanted answers. Through tears, she told me the same thing had happened to her, that she had moved into that apartment about a year ago, and that there had been another landlady before her. I processed that information for a minute, then asked how the hell that worked, and she said she didn't know exactly. What the last landlady told her was only that the 2 apartments, hers and the one she rented out, had been connected since the building was constructed, and that one drains time while the other gives it, like a straw. I know how insane that sounds, because my first instinct was to call it a lie. But she stood up, wiped her eyes, and put a key in my hand, telling me that both apartments were mine now and that she was moving out. I asked her what I was supposed to do with it. She gave me a small, tired smile and told me to rent it out. I thought about going to the police. I thought about trying to find the landlady. I thought about going back to my parents, but none of that would give those months back, or the years. I'm 22, but my body is decades older, and every time I look in the mirror, I can tell it won't just reverse on its own. In desperation, I listed my apartment on the same website where I found it, and moved to hers. The messages started coming in almost immediately. The first showing is today. That's why I'm writing this, out of guilt. One part of me keeps saying, I don't have to do this, but there has to be another way. But the other part that screams that I don't have a choice. that it's either this or accepting that I've lost all my youth. The girl coming to see the place sounded young and hopeful on the phone. She's excited to find a spot where she can have the best time of her life in this city. I remember sounding just like that. Okay, hear me out. Rent the apartment out on Airbnb. I know it sounds crazy, but listen. Instead of stealing a bunch of life from one person and making them old, you just take a little bit of life from like I don't know, 20 or 30 people. They won't even notice because they might have had like a day or two taken off their life, and you get young again, and you can just stay there and stay young forever if that's something you really want to do. I know, problem solved, guys. I'm here all week. Out of any Reddit story I think I've ever read, this one has the most terrifying twist. The details are all there, so if you guys figure this one out before the story ends, please put it down in the comments. I'm curious how many people get it. This one's from r/scary stories from user TrashTia. I'm pretty sure the boy I'm dating is AI generated. He's cute. That's the first thing that hits me as he enters the small coffee shop. He's tall, kind of like he's been molded by a surgeon's hands. A soul stuffed inside a perfect, borderline creepy mannequin with bright blue eyes and not a flaw in sight. He's every woman's dream, every YA book cover hottie. Bedroom hair, unbrushed, tousled, and unkempt. His clothes are season appropriate, a trench coat flung over jeans and a tee. But what really takes me off guard is his over-the-top grin, dimples perfectly etched into sculptured cheeks. He looks like he's laughing at a private joke, lips stretched into a wide, grinning smile. Too fake. His jaw would have given out by now. Pearly white teeth that are almost too white. His demeanor reminds me of every romance movie I've ever seen. The smile, the wink, the confident and yet slightly awkward stride as he makes his way over, well aware that he's attracting stares and loving every second of it. I've already made up my mind before he plonks himself down opposite me and confidently orders a macchiato. Hi, he introduces himself as Jude. It's hard to take him seriously. Jude. Even his name sounds like a product, as manufactured as him. He runs a hand through thick, perfect curls. Again, he knows he's being watched, knows he's the prettiest belle at the ball. He leans forward, chin resting on fist. He doesn't expect me to speak, doesn't even wait for me to respond. He comes with a script, already knows my responses, judging by my expressions. This man already knows me through and through. This man is 100% with zero doubt AI generated. He still smiles, still pretends. Were you waiting long? I smile back. Yes, I say, testing his responses. He's expecting me to say no, to lie, to tell him. Oh no, I wasn't waiting for 15 minutes. I actually just got here. But I don't. I grin and let my words hang in the air. He's not used to them, used to a girl insulting him, even if it's subtly. For a moment, I see his facade glitch slightly, lip wobbling, like for a second he's about to go off script. Somehow, he blinks away his confusion, smile widening. Well, I'm sorry, he says. This man knows exactly how a woman's mind works. He's been programmed with every possible reaction I'll have and a predetermined response for it. When he leans across the table and takes my hand, I inwardly flinch. You're freezing cold, I say, tugging my arm back. Of course he's freezing cold. His skin is artificially made, a synthetic strip of animal flesh stretched across a real human skeleton. His blood is an acidic solution, a battery that powers his heart. His brain is circuitry and code. He already knows everything about me. His every response will be cherry-picked to be perfect. I curl my lip. When synthetics were first introduced by Meta, artificial intelligence cruelly built over a human corpse, there was mass panic. Ethics questions were raised as Meta shamelessly built their factories across the globe. Dead bodies. They were using dead bodies and calling it recycling. We called it murder. Real human skeletons were being used as framework, stripped down and repurposed. Then they were released. The very first versions. They looked exactly like us, talked like us, breathed like us, laughed like us. They were so lifelike, so unapologetically human despite imperfections. So eventually, our walls crumbled, and we began to treat them like us. Then, when they began to brutally kill people, immediately going rogue, they were canned. AI synthetic humans lasted around a year, and I was still terrified of them. Jude shrugs off his jacket, like he really wants me to see how jacked he is. I ignore his shirt lifting up slightly, revealing toned muscles. The woman sitting beside us already taking photos. I downed half my iced coffee. "You're AI, aren't you?" I say casually, and his eyes darken. Jude laughs. He blinks, like he thinks I'm joking. "I'm sorry, what?" "Prove it," I say. Jude folds his arms, his lip curling. "Fine, I'll play your game. What are you, like the damn AI police?" I copy his stance, resting my fist on my chin. "When were you born?" Jude copies me, his smile challenging. He gets closer. His breath smells like peppermint. 2001. Do you want my full government name too? He doesn't have one. What he does have, however, is a fixed name and reference number. Your earliest memory, I demand. He frowns, tipping his head back like he's thinking. The man is perfect at mimicking, at learning basic human traits, human behavior. He's a natural at this. He knows how to play cocky, play unsure, play dumb. Oh, Jude, you are good, but not good enough. He's pretending to think about it, but he's had the answer all along. Built from thousands of possible memories coded inside his brain. Probably the time I projectile vomited funnel cake all over my mom when I was 7. I don't believe you, I say. Believe what you think. He rolls his eyes. Does he think I can't notice that his right eye gets stuck for a second? He's good at talking, sure, but he still needs to work on his demeanor. I'm not AI. He shoots me a grin. He's still being cocky, still thinks I'm going to let it go. I'm just naturally attractive, dude. I shrug. Then let's go prove it. His smile tightens. Panic creases his face, twitching between his lips. We both know what proving it entails. I thought this was a date, sweetheart. His stupid grin turns bitter. He leans back. I can tell he's weighing different reactions, different moves, different responses that I will give. Sweat beads on his forehead. Synthetic sweat that smells of bleach. Not an interrogation. I pull out the handcuffs I've stuffed in my jeans and cuff his right wrist before he can even think about running away. His eyes widen. What the hell are you doing? He tries to dive from his seat and is violently yanked back. I struggle to remain stoic. There's nothing I enjoy more than capturing AI synthetics. Please, he hisses as I drag him from the coffee shop. He stumbles over, no longer calm and confident and cocky. He's scared. His responses can't come out delayed. Panicked. His brain is overheating. I'm not AI, I look like AI. Listen, man, I can't help looking like this. I stuff him into the front seat of the car. And this time, he twists to me, lips curled into a snarl. I can almost pretend he's actually human. This is kidnapping, he whispers as I start the car. AI synthetics don't count, I tell him. You knew the rules. If we see someone who looks even slightly uncanny, we can take them for detection. The car flies forward, and he almost rolls off the seat. You're a monster, he grits through his teeth. I don't look at him. If you're 100% human, I'll apologize. But detection means, he let out a choked sob, his last-ditch effort. It's all just nonsensical garbage he's picked up from his melting down mind. Which I'm not falling for. Listen to me. My name is Jude Clare, he whimpers. I'm 24 years old. I went to college to study creative writing. I have a dog named Peanut. My mom's name is Katerina. He shuts up when I pull outside an AI detection center. Jude freezes up in his seat, bringing his knees to his chest. I can already hear screams inside, a shiver creeping through me. I grit my teeth and pull him out of the car. I hope you have a lawyer, he spits as I pull him through doors that slide open. The smell hits me first, a metallic tinge hanging in the air. There's nothing inside this center but a single machine that takes up the entire room, and a bored-looking security guard holding an iPad. The machine towers over me, a large humming metallic beast. I pretend not to see bloodstains being scrubbed from the white tiles. No. Jude stumbles back, the cuff sending him springing back to me. I drag him to the security guard, pasting on a smile. I'm pretty sure my boyfriend is AI generated, I say confidently, ignoring Jude's sputtering. Boyfriend? The guard takes one look at Jude and nods. He takes out his gun and points it at my date's head. Sir, kindly proceed within the machine for immediate AI detection, he states, his tone devoid of emotion. Please be advised that AI detection is exclusively intended for synthetic skin only. Humans entering the AI detector will be subject to automatic dismemberment. I'm not AI, Jude screamed, agony and frustration bleeding through his carefully crafted tone. Step inside, sir, the security guard says. I won't ask again. Jude hesitates before turning to me. He doesn't speak, doesn't cry out, but I know exactly what he's thinking. I uncuff him, and he's shoved forwards. The doors slowly slide open, and he staggers inside. When the door slams shut, I allow myself to exhale in relief. And then his screams start. Wailing, sobbing, pleading. I squeeze my eyes shut at the sound of blades stripping the skin from his bones and drilling directly into his skull for traces of AI. But I know he's not AI. I don't even look at the screen that I know flashes green. 100% human. I find myself standing in his blood that seeps from the door, staining my shoes. The security guard doesn't speak when the doors open. A cleaner rushing inside to disinfect the blades slicks scarlet. I walk back outside with names inside my head, memories I mimicked, learned. My mother's name is Katarina. I was born in 2001. I have a dog named Peanut. My earliest childhood memory. I vomited funnel cake on my mother when I was 7 years old. I was going to ace the Are You Human exam. Holy, I did not suspect that. That's like the plot twist of the century. The top comment on the story says, "Nuh-uh, nope, oh, screw this." I'm right there with you. Oh my gosh. This next one's another one that's just too good to be true. It starts with a clown that's handing out flyers on the street, but ends completely differently than you'd ever expect. Like, I don't think anybody could predict this ending. All I'll say is the OP just should have kept walking. The next story is also from r/scary stories from user Twisted Urban Tales. I left a group trip early. When my friends came back, something was very wrong. A couple of years ago, I saw a guy wearing a jester costume as I was walking home. It wasn't creepy, just very awkward. He was holding a stack of leaflets, trying to hand them to people who were clearly avoiding eye contact. It was too colorful and over the top. The whole thing just screamed try hard. I almost walked past him like everyone else, but then he stepped in front of me and held one out. Hey, step right in. The fun starts when you arrive at Blue Carnival Island, he said in a goofy voice. I frowned at him. Sorry, he said quickly, dropping the voice immediately. I know it looks weird. If I don't hit a sign-up quota, they'll make me wear the hat too. Damn, that's unfortunate. He cringed slightly. I looked down at the leaflet. Blue Carnival Island Experience, sponsored by... The logo of an energy company sat beneath the title. A holiday? I said. Yeah, he smiled, still a little embarrassed. Group trip package. Got flights, accommodation, the whole thing. It's actually, really good, to be honest. You don't sound convincing. I'm better when people don't look directly at me, he said with a grimace. Ruins the illusion. Then he smiled. Not a ridiculous smile this time, just normal. I laughed despite myself, and we continued talking on the street for longer than I expected. We started texting that night. His name was Matt, and he was very easy to talk to. At first, we just made jokes about the costume, then it turned into longer conversations. Hobbies, life, all sorts of stuff. A few days later, we met up again in town. He wasn't wearing the costume, and I couldn't help noticing he was actually pretty good looking without all the powder and makeup. We talked over lunch for a while, and as we were finishing up, he asked if I'd given any more thought to the trip. I do need to get paid. Remember, no pressure, he grinned. After a bit more banter, I finally asked him for the actual details, and he began explaining the arrangements. I get a bonus if the group stays together, he said at one point. That's, kind of their whole thing. He hesitated for a second. It's a structured experience. Probably just one of those all-inclusive trips where you meet new people and end up staying in the same hotel, I thought. A week later, I signed up. My friends Chloe and Tyler were coming too. I convinced them it would just be something we could post about after and laugh over drinks. When we arrived at the bus station, I was surprised to see about 60 of us, possibly more. There were families, couples, and a few older people. Matt arrived in full costume, bouncing between people, high-fiving kids and hyping everyone up. It all felt fun at the time. Then, when he caught my eye in that dumb costume again, he smiled in a way that made everyone else blur out for a second. "Sarah, you made it," he said when he got close. "Of course, I'm your best recruit." "Not even remotely true," he smirked, "but I'll pretend it is." Before boarding, he gathered everyone together. "All right, everyone, just one thing," Matt said, clapping his hands lightly. "When we get there, it's really important you stay with the group. Don't wander off on your own." "Why?" someone asked. He hesitated just for a second. Wouldn't want anyone getting lost. Everything was normal until Amsterdam. The flight to the island was delayed overnight. Matt handled it almost instantly, booking hotels, reorganizing transport, and keeping everyone calm. I had to admit, it was impressive, if anything. Chloe joked that he should quit and get a real job. He just laughed it off nonchalantly. At the hotel, everything felt like a temporary inconvenience. People were drinking in the lobby, making the best of it. I went to see Matt. His room was almost empty. There was no suitcase and no clothes scattered around, just a bag on the chair. "You sure travel light," I said. "I don't stay in one place long," he replied with a grin. I laughed at that, and we continued talking in his room until the sun went down. That night, I woke up to knocking on my hotel door. Loud, urgent. I blinked as I opened it, still half asleep. Matt was standing there, but not like before. No costume, and he wasn't smiling either. He looked pale and tense. "You need to leave," he said firmly. Something was very wrong. "What?" "I booked you on a flight. It leaves in an hour. You need to go now." He shoved a plane ticket in my hand. I just stared at him. "What are you talking about? What about everyone else?" "I'll handle it." "No, Matt, what's going on?" He stepped closer and looked in my eyes, shaking his head. "Sarah, I don't have time to explain. You just need to trust me." "Then tell Chloe and Tyler, I said I'll handle it." Silence. My heart pounded. He just looked at me like he was trying to memorize something. Then he kissed me. Not gently or slowly. Desperately. "Just please go," he said quietly. I wish I could say I argued with him and demanded answers, but I didn't. Something in his voice had changed. The easy, joking tone that he normally spoke with was replaced by a terrified urgency. I packed up quickly, hands shaking. The hotel room suddenly felt unfamiliar, and every sound in the hallway made me flinch. The airport felt too bright and normal when I went back in. I moved through it as fast as I could, checking my phone every few minutes, waiting for a message from Matt explaining what was going on. Nothing came. On the flight home, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face at the door. He looked like he was trying to hold something back. I kept replaying it in my head, trying to figure out what he hadn't said. When I got home, my family asked me while I was back from the trip early. I told them I was feeling ill and decided to cancel. The easiest explanation. I texted Chloe and Tyler too, telling them the same thing. For a moment, I worried they wouldn't reply, my mind jumping to worst case scenarios. But then both of them messaged back a day later, telling me to get better soon. Chloe texted again after a few days. "Made it. Island was amazing. You missed out. Hope you're feeling better now." I was confused. Everything seemed normal after they got back. But the look on Matt's face that night certainly wasn't. For a while, I just let it sit. I didn't really know what to make of it. Matt and I stopped texting after that night, and I didn't reach out either. I wouldn't have known what to say even if I tried. Chloe and Tyler kept asking me about Matt, but I brushed it off every time. They probably thought we had an argument in the hotel or something of that sort. I don't know how to explain what really happened there, so I didn't. Then a few weeks later, something began to feel off about Chloe. Not enough to point at, just small things. She laughed at the wrong moments and forgot details she shouldn't have. I only noticed because I'd known her for years. Tyler's change was more noticeable. He was still him, just quieter and flatter in general. At one point, I mentioned something that had happened years ago, something all three of us had been there for. Chloe hesitated, then smiled and said, "Oh yeah, that." But it wasn't right. It wasn't how she used to remember things. But I couldn't put my finger on it, so I tried to disregard it and moved on. The The weeks passed, then months. Nothing felt too out of the ordinary, at least, nothing I could point out yet, until one night at Chloe's. We were in her kitchen, cooking like we used to. She was talking about something, but I wasn't really listening. I was watching her. I'd caught myself doing that a lot lately, looking for something I couldn't quite name. Then, mid-sentence, she faltered. Just slightly at first, she repeated a word, like she'd lost her place. Then, her eyes rolled back. Not naturally, not like someone fainting or blinking too hard. They spun, fast and unnatural, until there was nothing but white. For a second, that's all I could see. 2 blank whites staring straight through me. I screamed. And then, just like that, they snapped back. She blinked a few times, looking confused. "Sarah, oh my gosh, are you okay?" I couldn't speak. I just stared at her, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I took a step back without meaning to. I stopped myself. What was I supposed to say? After a few moments, she laughed it off, said she felt dizzy for a second, low blood sugar or something. Everything seemed normal again, so I nodded and pretended to accept it. Then we went back to cooking. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking because I knew I hadn't imagined it, and deep down I already knew there was only one person who could explain it. I called Matt that night. It had been months since that night in the hotel, and I was surprised he even answered. At first, he avoided it, tried to brush it off, asked if I was sure or if maybe I'd just been tired. But there was something in my voice that gave me away. After a pause, he sighed. "Can we meet?" he said. "I'll explain properly." He came over later that evening. No small talk, no easing into it. The second he stepped inside, I turned to him. What happened on that island? He sat down and didn't answer straight away, but when he did, his voice was calm. Too calm. "Do you believe there are other versions of you, Sarah?" he asked. "Not really." I mean, yeah, who would believe that? No. "That's fair," he said. "Most people don't." He looked at me. "But there are versions where your life goes differently, depending on what decisions you make, right?" "Sure," I nodded. He took a breath and continued. "Some changes are small. You might end up with a different haircut. Others are bigger. You might live in a different place." I frowned but kept listening. "And some of those versions of you are not okay." My blood ran cold. "They're suffering," he continued, "in ways you can't imagine." "Matt, why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to understand what I did." "What you did?" He met my eyes. "The island. It's where they switch people." Silence. I waited for the punchline, but there was none. "The version of you that goes there doesn't come back." I swallowed. That is not funny. But his face was dead serious. Silence stretched between us again. "Then, where are they?" I finally said, quieter. "Somewhere worse. Much worse." "And the people who come back?" I whispered. "They're from those other places, and not just any of those places. They're the versions of you that have suffered the most." "No. They take different versions of them from other timelines," he continued, "and swap them. Then they replace their memories so it all fits." "That's insane." "I know." He didn't sound fazed at all. I stood there, frozen, still trying to process all of it. "But why?" He paused and looked away for a second, like he was deciding how much to say. "Because every time it happens, it generates energy," he said. "A lot of it. More than anything else they've found." "And you what, work for them?" He nodded. "Why would you tell me this?" My voice cracked. "Because I couldn't send you there." That hit harder than anything else. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding it in for a long time. "I wasn't always part of this," he said. "I was on a trip to Thailand a few years back. Backpacking. One night I got taken. Wrong place, wrong time. No idea who they were. I just remember the pain, the blood, the screaming. It went on for weeks, every day from morning till night." He paused, as if recalling the horror of it. "And then one day it just stopped," he continued. "Not gradually. All of the sudden it was just gone, and I woke up somewhere else, clean, no injuries or pain." "Where?" I asked quietly. "A facility," he said. "Rooms full of people. They were unconscious, lying on beds. Thought it was a hospital at first." He shook his head. One of the staff came over and explained it like it was nothing. Said those people were being processed. Their memories were being replaced so they'd match the versions of themselves from this world. I stared at him. They told me what had happened, he went on, that I'd been switched. The version of me that belonged here had gone to the island for the holiday. I took his place. My throat felt dry. And they just told you that? They didn't care if I believed it, he said. They gave me a choice. He paused briefly. I could have my memories replaced like those people, live this version of my life like nothing ever happened, or I could keep my memories and know the truth. And you chose, I began. I chose to remember, he said, but it came with a condition. He rubbed his forehead. I had to work for them, he continued. Recruitment, minimum of 10 people every cycle. Why you? I asked the same thing, he said. They said I scored high on emotional intelligence and communication, and that I was mentally stable enough to function after what I'd been through. He gave a humorless smile. Apparently, that's rare. A chill ran through me. What I'd once found so endearing and real, his awkwardness, the way he stumbled over words, I couldn't help but question how much of it had actually been real. And if you don't, I asked. If I don't meet the quota, he said, I'm fired. That means they wipe my memories, replace them with ones from the version that was here, the one who was sent to Thailand in my place. Silence settled between us. So either I do this, he said quietly, or I let them take it all away and go back to not knowing any of this, like your friends. Then it all came rushing back. Chloe hesitating over memory she should have known instantly. Tyler reacting just a second too late. All the little things I'd try to ignore. Because they didn't make sense on their own, but together they did. They weren't them. I was looking at something wearing their faces, carrying their memories, while the real Tyler and Chloe had been sent somewhere far worse. It was my fault. I had convinced them to go. And if Matt hadn't told me to leave that night, that would have been me too. A cold, sinking feeling settled in my chest as another thought followed it. If you don't meet the quota, I said slowly, then your memories are replaced. That would make me the only one left who knew. And even then, would it matter? I only believed Matt because of everything I'd seen. The way that night played out, the look on his face, and the things I noticed afterward. The way Chloe's eyes went completely white. I thought about trying to explain all of this to anyone else. My family, the fake Chloe and Tyler, anyone at all, but I already knew how it would sound. Insane. No one would believe me. I looked at him. How many people? I asked quietly. How many have been switched? I don't know, he said. Then he looked back at me. But it's more than you think. That was the last time we really talked about it like that. After a while, it stopped being something we discussed and preferred to avoid. Life went on, and eventually, we got together. If I'm being honest, I didn't feel safe anymore without him. He was the only one who understood what had happened, the only one who knew. Nowadays, we still go to work, see friends, make plans. We still do everything we did before. I still see him come home in that jester costume, but it doesn't look ridiculous or even remotely funny anymore. Sometimes things start to feel normal again. I think we both try to believe that. As long as he meets that sales quota, which he always does, nothing changes. He's still my Matt. The same Matt I met that night handing out flyers. And he'll keep meeting it. He has to. Moral of the story. Don't go to Thailand with a jester that you met on a sidewalk somewhere, because you won't be you anymore. Oh my gosh. The crazy part about this is that this could have happened. This could have happened to you, and you might just not know it. You'll understand why I added this one in as soon as you hear the title. Let me give you a hint. It has to do with murder and getting away with it. Need I say more? The next one's from r/scary stories from user MadHatter006. Take a walk with me. I want to chat with you. I want to tell you how I got away with murder. Do you love your family? Do you really? Think about it. Take a moment and walk with me. Family is forever. Family is a group of people that are supposed to love, guide, and protect you. So many people have said. Family is bound to you for eternity by blood. With how many people that had to come together to make you, just you. You're drowning in blood, sweetie, and so am I. My family was on a different level of messed up. My father was a car salesman who got high off crack cocaine and screwed his coworker, smiling in the faces of his neighbors who whisper about his sexuality behind his back, while he's thinking he has everyone fooled. Idiot. My mother wasn't innocent. In fact, she was worse than my dad. To everyone else, she was the unassuming second-grade teacher who went to church every Sunday and attended a book club with her friends. Liar. She was horrible. A righteous bitch who would get friendly with her brother after her husband went to sleep. Beat me with her precious brown leather Bible in hand whenever I took too long doing the dishes. She would lock me in the basement for hours and hours. She once left me in there from the crack of dawn to the middle of the night, and when she let me out, she smiled in my face and told me, "I honestly forgot you were there." I begged for food, but she told me it was too late to cook, and she shouldn't have to waste food on me. Waste. My older brother got the better treatment from my family. My father and mother didn't beat him like they would beat me. They didn't starve him like they would starve me. He stayed in his room on his computer, shirtless sometimes while he talked smoothly to some man or woman on the other side of his camera. The money he got for his cam sessions got him weed, white rum, and a car that he didn't have a license for. Bought secondhand from a friend from somewhere in Chicago. Regardless of the law, he would take it out on practice. He didn't care for my curled up, screaming, and scared self, who he threw into the trunk of his car. He would drive around for hours and speed up when he saw a speed bump in the road. Then laugh as he heard me cry in pain. That's how I broke my arm. This was all before I turned 7, just so you have a better image of how messed up this story gets. Are you ready? It was a cool Tuesday afternoon. My backyard was covered in leaves. Orange, yellow, red. I had just turned 15 and it was the middle of autumn. I was alone as I sat on the back porch steps. Not just alone on the steps, but there was no one else home. It was so peaceful. The kind of peace you wish would never go away. But good things never last long, do they? I could hear my mother's heels clicking up the sidewalk as she got to the house. Her loud laughter let me know she was on the phone, and she only ever genuinely liked talking to one person on the phone, my uncle. With her keys jingling in the lock, it was such a smooth transition for me to close the back door and hop up to my room. My house had no pictures. The walls weren't ever decorated with anything, and I always smelled of something foul. No one in this house ever thought to make memories. Everyone was too busy trying to forget. But forget what? It's not like they've been suffering. I've been the lightning rod for them as long as I've been breathing, but there's no pity for me, just abuse. Passing my brother's room, it now had the permanent smell of weed and burnt rubber. I made sure to move quickly and quietly when I passed his room. His attention on me was never good, as I've learned over the years. How do you explain to someone that you've created tactics to move around your own house, just so you won't have to be noticed by your family, all for the sake of your own safety, your life? How do you explain that? You can't, or at least that's what you're taught when you're young. Your mother scolding you for tattling and telling you to keep your mouth shut. Whatever happens in the family stays in the family. Snitches get stitches, my brother would say. I hated my brother. I would always have to escape to my room whenever they came home. I would always have to hide, listening carefully at the door for anyone in the hall so I could run to the bathroom without being noticed. Watching which floorboard I stepped on at night on my way to the kitchen, sleeping with my alarm clock under my pillow to get an earlier start so I could avoid everyone else. Taking showers at the break of dawn where everyone was still too deep in sleep to be disturbed by the sound of spraying water. When they were home, there was no such thing as peace, but I'll get to the point. That Tuesday night was the night that my worldview changed entirely. Humans are naturally wired for survival. You do what you must to keep breathing, but you can only handle so much before you snap. My mother had decided to throw a party. It started from the middle of the afternoon and went on into the late night. My father, mother, and brother all sat in the living room with our neighbors, and looking at them, you could almost trick yourself into believing they were perfectly normal. They laughed, smiling politely, and entertained their guests as everyone drank and ate gross goat cheese on saltine crackers. But of course, I knew better. My father wasn't fooling anyone with that long sleeve he was wearing. He was trying to hide the point of entry, all while looking sleep-deprived and waifish. The veins at the side of his forehead were bulging with the need to run to the bathroom and just do one more line. To get through the evening and I'll quit. My mother's liver was going out. She was once skinny with gentle curves, like a supermodel if she twisted her body in the mirror long enough to fool herself. Now she was as bloated as a whale, none of her clothes fit, and she had to go out and buy a new wardrobe. My uncle's sitting next to her, but he entertained her neighbor from next door instead, laughing flirtatiously and laying his hand on her knee. Our neighbor flirted back with him, tossing her hair over her shoulder and batting her lashes. Our neighbor was married to a Marine, and my brother, sitting with his friends, all drinking beer and talking as if they had nothing to talk about. None of them had jobs, none of them had families to take care of, none of them had shit to do with their lives except mooch off their parents. They could only talk about memories from high school, which quickly got them bored. Then they were reduced to only sitting in silence while everyone else talked to them about their own lives. I sat in my room, avoiding them all. Those idiots, sadists, adulterers, and liars. Every one of them is the next person's paramour in one way or another. By the time the party had died, it was 12 o'clock. I knew it wouldn't be a good night based on how hard my mother stomped up the steps. I saw from my window my uncle escaping to my neighbor's house, his hand on her butt as she giggled drunkenly. My mother has fell out of favor. Funny. She screamed my name and demanded that I come down and clean up her mess. Moving down the hall to my room, it was like a horror movie, her slow steps moving closer and closer to my door. My arms folded over the windows as I took in the cold night air. I can still remember the feel of the wind on my face. My door was thrown open by my mother, her long hair hanging in front of her face as she desperately held on to her wine glass. She stumbled and swayed in the doorway. Her eyes couldn't even find me. She yelled for me to come down and clean up her mess again, my brother yelling from his room for her to shut up. As I looked at her, as I watched her, I got this strange feeling, a feeling that could only be described as sadistic, but also empty at the same time. It was like a dying candle in the wind, a wind that just kept on coming. Her eyes found mine, and she stumbled into the room as she took a sip from her wine glass. She called my name, and when I didn't respond, that began an onslaught of insults and threats. The same insults and threats that I've heard for all of the time I'd been under her care. It wasn't anything new. Her mocking, taunting, vicious insults were nothing new to me anymore. The wind stopped, and the light on the candle flickered back to life, with plenty of wax left. It was like a wave of clean, fresh water was thrown on me. I stood up, my eyes scanning her blubbery form from her heel to the crown of her head. She did just the same, mocking me as the wine in her glass sloshed around, provoking me with her words. My brother screamed from his room for both of us to be quiet. Fine, I'll make her be quiet. I lunged quickly, pushing her onto the floor. Her size betrayed her. She was too big now to move quickly. She struggled to stand as I calmly walked to my bedroom door and locked it. Her wine glass had fell out of her hand, and the cup broke. The smell of Riesling coated the dull brown carpet, mixing in evenly with the foul smell of the house. One tall shard of glass laid near my feet. I picked it up and made my way over to my mother. The candle was burning bright now that the wind had finally stopped. An easy slit across her throat prevented her from screaming, too. The shard cut my own fingers as I made myself into a butcher for my pig of a mother. I had felt this wave of ease come over me as I stood over her now mutilated body. I heard my brother's door open. With every step he took to get to my room, memories flashed behind my eyelids. His abuse and torment, his cruelty. Every step brought a new memory back, and soon enough he was banging at my door. There weren't enough steps to match how many times he'd broken my arm or fractured my ribs. There weren't enough steps to match how many hours a day I'd spend in the darkness of his trunk. I'd remember the summer, in the darkness, him zooming over a speed bump, me hitting my head and blacking out. He threw me on the front lawn when we got home. Didn't even bother to take me inside, but instead left me under the bleeding hot sun. Watching as my mother's body emptied out her blood, soaking into the carpet as her face is fitted perfectly in a look of pain and fear. Strangely enough, it's the prettiest she's ever looked. My brother continued to bang on the door, banging continuously, and demanded that I open the door. So I did. and I delivered the same gruesome death to him too, a slit across his throat. But instead of cutting him open, I beat him until every bone I could get to break was broken, stomping on his arms and legs hard with my foot. I'd taken a page from his book and aimed for the most vital areas. The wind stayed down. I dragged the shard of glass on the wall, cutting into the dirty blue wallpaper. Then I noticed something. I didn't hear my father come up the steps, nor did he complain about the noise my mother was making. I searched the house for him, just to see if he was even home, passing through the living room that was messy with cheap wine and gross snacks. Pillows thrown about and furniture moved across the room to make space for a dance area. I saw the guest bathroom light on. The door was cracked open and I could see a shadow. I got close to the bathroom and saw the dirty brown loafers my father wore. Then his legs that were stretched out in front of him that almost peeked out the door. Pushing open the door, I saw his body laying there against the sink. A lighter sat bent by his knee, a burnt spoon in one hand and a syringe still jammed in his left arm. His tie was laying crumpled up next to the lighter, and he wasn't breathing. It was bound to happen sooner or later. How convenient that it should be now. I left him there. The state of his own demise should be left alone. It's the only thing he had in his final moments, weakness and addiction. I made my way out the open back door, kicking it closed with my foot, walking around the side of the house as I wiped off my fingerprints from the shard of glass. I made my way over to the neighbor's house. She didn't even have the decency to close her living room curtains. You could probably guess what was happening there. If she only knew where this pig had been before. I threw the shard of glass into her rose bushes and continued on down the sidewalk. I'm sure you're wondering now what happened. Did the police find me? Where did I run to? Do I feel guilty? Sweetheart, it made national news. It was everywhere. A brother had killed his sister and her entire family after a night of partying with her neighbors. The weapon was found in the rose bushes of a neighbor's of his sister's just across the street from the house they were murdered in. Both their faces were plastered on the 5 o'clock news. He pled his innocence, but texts between him and his sister were leaked and their incestuous relationship was revealed to the public. The neighbor wasn't off the hook either. The police guessed he killed them out of rage and jealousy sometime after the party and went to go make a victim of the adulterous neighbor lady. It's amazing how easily people can be fooled. It's also amazing how easily someone can obtain a fake ID, a fake birth certificate, and a fake passport. Cutting hair is easy as well. Isn't that what people do anyways when they want to feel like a new person? Now for the last question. Do I feel guilty? No, absolutely not. In fact, during the whole ordeal, from pushing my mother to the floor to walking off into the night, the only thing I could feel was relief. It's the feeling of being raised in a cage and then finally breaking free. Sweet, sweet freedom. So no, I don't feel the slightest bit guilty. Never even for the neighbor lady who made a stupid decision and cheated with the wrong man. I do not feel guilty. Besides, if you had the chance to kill your demons, I'm sure you would do the same. You're already drowning in blood. What's the difference if you spill more? This sounds real. That was a really good story, and I guess you could say that when someone's pushed to that limit where they break, anything can happen. In this next story, it really takes about 3 sentences to tell that something is seriously wrong. I'm not going to spoil it for you, just here you go. The next story is from r/scary stories from Trash Tia. They finally found a cure for bullying. A year ago, Crystal Schuyler, a well-known celebrity streamer, took her own life in front of 50,000 viewers after detailing her harassment. Her video went viral, parents across the nation coming to a grim conclusion. Their children were corrupted, poisoned, evil, and needed to be fixed. So a streamer died, and we were all paying the consequences. Officially, it was called the Social Alignment Program, created for the sole purpose of smoothing us down, removing the parts of us that judged, that looked down on people, that insisted on hierarchy. Crystal's video didn't just go viral, it gave the government an incentive to cut out bullying once and for all. Literally. I really didn't want a detailed explanation of what the procedure involved, but it was law to explain it to a child. So I was forced to sit through half an hour of quirky government-sponsored YouTube videos featuring influencers telling me that my brain was going to be cut open. The thing was, I never bullied anyone. I did tease kids. I called Jesse Harlow a stuck-up bitch in 8th grade. I shoved Sam Holland into a classroom because my friends thought it was funny, but I wasn't, right? Bullying was worse. Bullying wasn't me. I judged my peers, yes, but we all did. Once we were self-aware, we immediately began judging everything around us. I judged myself. I judged my parents, my siblings, my teachers. I laughed at their stupid hair, their lisps, the way they spoke slowly, their clothes, if their parents weren't rich, their phones, if they didn't have the latest model. But wasn't that what being a kid was? Wasn't bullying just natural? Sitting in an uncomfortable chair, my wrists were gently pinned down. The room was clinical white. The chair was ice cold. Uncomfortable leather. I didn't like it. The device was kind of like a halo. It descended from the ceiling and settled over my skull, coming apart like a vice and gripping my entire head. My reflection in the equipment mirror stared back at me, a trembling 17-year-old trying to stay calm. Allison, the nurse gestured for me to lean forward and rest my chin on another piece of equipment, placing my head between spinning metal structures, a blinding white light piercing my right eye. I wasn't alone. Across the room, a boy sat cross-legged on an observation bed, arms folded. I recognized him. He used to push kids into lockers and threaten teachers. Whenever a nurse came near him, he started screaming. "I have rights," he kept repeating in an almost hysterical giggle. "You can't do this to me, because I have rights." Smoothing was mandatory, so whether he liked it or not, it was going to happen. He shot me a disgusted glare, lip curled like I willingly slumped into the murder chair. Like I wasn't held at gunpoint and dragged to the procedure room. The boy was panicking, sweat clinging to his head, thick glued over his eyes. I watched him dive off the observation bed, sprinting out of the room while his nurse filled an IV. Part of me cheered him on. The rest of me thought he was a moron. I tried extremely hard not to notice them thrumming to life, foam discs immediately pressing pressure against my temples. "Okay, Allison, can you look straight forward, please?" The nurse instructed from behind a pale blue mask. I pretended I couldn't see her smug smile in the folds. "Directly at the bright flash, and try not to blink, all right? You're doing so well, sweetie, so brave." I couldn't choke back my cry, my eyes stinging, the bright light pulsing. "I want my mom," I whispered, trying to pull my head back, but my skull was already stuck between thrumming metal. "Please." I gave up trying to be brave, trying to accept it. My entire body trying to fling me backward. "Let me go," I screamed, thrashing at Velcro restraints, pinning my wrists. "Let me go. I want to go home. I want to go home right now." All of the anger, the agony, the frustration at my parents ignited, exploding from my mouth in a vicious string of incomprehensible word barf. Mom didn't want me to have the procedure. She thought it would kill me. Dad said he wanted me to have it. He refused to have a bully for a daughter. "Relax, Allison," the nurse cooed from behind the structure. "We're almost there." Her voice faded in and out as sharp pain scratched the back of my head. Deeper, like it was digging through my brain, picking me apart piece by piece. "Why don't we talk about your favorite thing, huh? Children undergoing alignment tend to respond better when they're engaged." I swallowed thickly, and that sharp scratch became a lightning bolt rattling my skull. I could no longer blink, my body paralyzed. "Allison," the nurse hummed. "Can you try to say something?" Another pulsing light erupted in front of my eyes. "Speak, Allison," the nurse instructed. "We need to know the smoothing has been successful." I blinked again, sensation flooding back, but not normal sensation. The machine crushing my skull was barely an afterthought. The giant needle sticking into the back of my head didn't feel real. "Yes," I said, and the machine was turned off. I was free, the metal structures prying from my temples. The nurse gently led me back to the chair. I didn't feel cold anymore. I didn't really feel like anything. The nurse wore a wide smile, tying a bracelet around my wrist. Her gloved hands were still covered in my blood. "That's just to tell your parents you've had the procedure," she hummed, shoving paperwork in my face. "You may experience side effects, but they'll wear off in the next 24 hours. Nausea and vomiting are common after the smoothing, but do come back to us if you experience any of the following: nosebleeds, headaches, and using sudden profanity and expletive language. I nodded, smiling. Yes, thank you. The nurse grinned back. No, thank you. She ruffled my hair. Don't you feel so much better, Allison? I strode toward the door, pulled it open, and accidentally trapped my finger in the hinge. The nurse turned pale, her eyes widening. Oh my goodness, she stared at my throbbing thumb. I knew the pain was there, I knew it existed, but I was numb. Strange. Foggy thoughts. I should have screamed. I should have cried, but I was fine. The nurse pulled back her mask. Allison, are you all right? Yes, I said, smiling again. I'm fine. I was fine. Everything was fine. I walked home in the rain, but I didn't feel it soaking through my clothes. Mom threw away all the paperwork I gave her and slapped me across the face. You're no daughter of mine, she snarled, like I was a stranger, prodding the bandage around my skull. You're a shell of her. That was fine. Days collapsed into a blur of nothing. Hours, minutes, days, weeks, months. My bedroom ceiling was gray when I opened my eyes. The sky was gray. Flowers were gray. Ice cream tasted like cardboard. Looking at someone was gray. Talking to them in gray. Every time Mom insulted and screamed at me was gray. When I visited my aunt, she showed me a picture of a political figure, laughing. Oh my God, look at the state of his hair. I wasn't sure why she was laughing. To me, the person looked fine. The world grew silent. In class, every student sat and listened and kept their heads down. The teachers called us well-behaved angels. At lunch, the same boy from the procedure room bumped into me in the cafeteria. Sorry, he smiled. I noticed the bandage wrapped around his head, burns staining his temples, half-lidded, unblinking eyes. He was still trembling. The trauma of the procedure affecting his body while his mind was a vacant nothing. That was my fault. It's okay, I said, and walked away. Then I bumped into him again, outside the girls' bathroom. Sorry, he smiled. That was my fault. I smiled back. It's okay. And then the next day, heading to gym class, he shouldered past me a little harder, elbowing me in the eye. Pain struck. Nuclear pain. Real pain that was so real, so visceral, my legs gave way, sending me crashing to the floor, my mouth opening, a raw screech suffocating my throat. I swallowed it down like vomit. Blinking back dancing lights flashed behind my eyelids. I managed to glimpse him through flickering lashes and caught a single flash of color among the suffocating grayscale. I never realized his nose was bleeding. Sorry, the boy apologized as usual, but he didn't walk away this time. I stood, I blinked. The world was still gray, still dull. It's okay, I smiled. Oh, really? The boy's lip curled slightly, one brow raised. Again, color exploded, vivid and beautiful. The most beautiful shade of red decorated his lips and chin. He wound his fist back and swung it directly into my face. I screamed this time. Numbness became freeing. Feeling became sensation. Sensation became emotion, and this time, pain was glorious, filthy, agonizing. Blood ran from my own nose, hot and wet. So wet, I traced each rivulet sliding down the curve of my throat. The boy stepped in front of me, lips curved, nostrils flaring. His eyes were different, frenzied, flicking back and forth. Are you okay? His voice held an unmistakable tone of mockery. I straightened up, swiping blood from my face with my sleeve. It's fine, I said, smiled, and then realized I was grimacing. I'm fine. I turned to walk away, a dull, throbbing pain striking the back of my head, and he shoved me, again, harder. Something ignited in my bones, my thoughts short-circuiting. It was right and wrong, and feral, twisting my stoic lips into a scowl. Prick. The name spluttered from my lips in a hiss, carried by blood filling my mouth, and then I couldn't stop myself. I gagged my mouth, but my lips were already moving, already in control. Watch where you're going. Something hot drew me to him, my body twitching. Are you blind? He smiled. I shoved him, choking on hysterical giggles. You look like a toe. He punched me in the face again. I enjoyed the sting. I enjoyed the way my head swung back, my jaw clicking out of place. I enjoyed the blood running down my face. I hate your ponytail, he spat, giggling. Somehow I was nose to nose with him, my skin on fire, my breath stuck in my throat. Something hot and rich filled my nose, intoxicating me. "Well, I hate your face," I snapped back, reveling in his breaths tickling my face. "You're a little twerp." He grinned. "Oh yeah?" I wrapped my arms around his waist, pulling him closer. I ran my lips across his neck, a shiver sliding down my spine. "Yeah," I said, and ripped his throat out, but his teeth were already piecing mine. His giggles were muffled, manic, as he burrowed into me, and a part of me, this feral, animalistic part of me, squealed in delight. His blood running down my throat, his flesh stuck between my teeth. They should have just gotten us counseling. All right, lesson learned. Get the kids counseling. Don't take away the part of them that makes them human, because then they'll just turn into animals. The next story is from r/scary stories from user Trash Tia. It's been a year since our town's adults disappeared, and everyone thinks it was me. Future compilation drove in here. Do I even need to say anything about this one? I mean, you heard that title, right? I was screaming at Mom when she exploded. 1 minute, she was completely in control of the argument, shooting me the mother of all glares across the dining room table, and the next, she was dripping from my face like congealed spaghetti sauce. Her voice was still alive in my ears, even with her staining my cheeks. Dripping from my lashes, I could taste her in my mouth. "You're a child," Mom's voice echoed in my mind. "I'm old enough to drive a car," I had said matter-of-factly, waving my spoon in protest. I reached for my favorite cereal, but she slapped my hand away and placed a bowl of plain oats in front of me. I had been cursed with an almond mom, which meant the only snacks I ever saw had raisins instead of chocolate chips. Breakfast was always the root of all disagreements in the Sinclair household. Mom wasn't a morning person. My brother and sister had headed to school early. I couldn't imagine why. With your father supervising, Mom's grip on her coffee tightened. I could tell she was ready to blow up, but I was determined to change her mind. Her argument was that she didn't want me to get hurt, but I knew it went deeper than that. Mom wanted to ruin my life. She was an expert at it, already forbidding me from going out of town and enforcing a curfew. I said no, and I mean no, Mom said with a sigh. "You're inexperienced. When you're 18, I'll think about it. End of conversation." She prodded the table impatiently. "Eat your breakfast, please." "But that's not fair." I could feel my blood boiling. "Why am I the one being punished? You're giving Sarah lessons." She fixed me with a warning look. "You're not being punished." "I clearly am," I retorted. "I don't see the same energy with Nathaniel." Mom sighed. "Your brother is 1 year older. He is old enough to drive a car. I'm finished discussing this matter with you. If you disagree, you're free to move out and make up your own rules." I slammed my spoon on the table. "But," Mom sipped her coffee, "end of conversation. You're not even being fair." Mom's eyes narrowed. End. She put heavy emphasis on the word. I didn't even want to hear it. She was so stubborn, even more childish than me, and I was supposed to be the kid. Instead of listening to her, I pressed my hands over my ears and screamed in frustration. My own words trembled on my lips, halting when something warm splashed across my face, followed by a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I felt the shock of it, rich copper filling my mouth and splattering over my eyes. Ew. Initially, I thought she'd gone to the extreme and thrown her coffee in my face. But coffee wasn't this thick and coppery, clinging to my lashes and blurring my vision. It sounded like a nuclear bomb had gone off right in front of me. A slowly expanding bright light, darkness speckling across my eyes, and then nothing. Mom was there, scowling at me disapprovingly, and then she wasn't. I remember her face being carved with morning sunlight filtering through the blinds, her loose ponytail trailing down her back, and her bright pink bathrobe. I blinked slowly, the ringing sound growing louder, more intense, like a singular coin rattling around in my skull. The sunlight was still there, but it was blocked out, only existing in strands of glittering light peeking through the intense smear of red covering my eyes. She was everywhere, and yet also somehow still existing in front of me, her torso swaying back and forth like a bad cartoon. Blinking red from my eyes, I could sense a cry slowly clawing its way up my throat. Different shades of red covered our kitchen, painting the walls and dripping from the countertop. The coin rattling in my skull stopped dancing. My ears popped, and the world came to a grinding stop around me. Something wet and fleshy dropped from the ceiling, and the scream that had been wrangled in my throat, fighting for an escape, slipped out in a sob that racked my chest. Mom felt like congealed spaghetti sauce clinging to my face, pieces of her skull sticking to my pajamas. When her torso smacked onto the ground, a horrifying cavern where her head used to be, I stumbled back, slipping in the spreading red pool gliding across our kitchen tiles. I remembered how to move. In one stride, I was out of the kitchen, gasping for breath, my hands on my knees. In two strides, I was standing on our doorstep, staring dazedly at a crashed car in the middle of the road. Several of them scattered down the block. I recognized this one. Miss Petra's Honda Civic. The car had flipped onto its side, but I could see the scarlet dripping from the windows. There was someone in there. A little girl, 5 or 6 years old. Her mouth was wide, O-shaped, streaks of red pooling down her face, dark ringlets of hair stuck to her pale skin. Emily, her daughter. I didn't hear her cries until my ears popped again, but this time it wasn't just Emily. Screams were erupting across my neighborhood. Our town had come to a standstill, shrieking car alarms joining the I gotta Google how to say this word.
Cacophony.
Our town had become a standstill, shrieking car alarms joining the cacophony of cries enveloping together. Pulling Emily out of the smoking wreck of the car, I covered the little girl's eyes and held her to my chest. What was left of Miss Petra was slumped in her seatbelt. It wasn't just my mother and Miss Petra. After taking Emily home, the effects of seeing my mother blown to pieces right in front of me started to blossom. I scratched at the skin of my arm, but I couldn't get her off me. She was caked into my hair and glued to my lashes. I spat several times, and then my gut lurched, heaving up undigested cereal. In a daze, I checked every house. Each one held a similar scene, an explosion of grisly red and children without parents. Once the ringing in my ears subsided and I regained some control over myself, I joined the growing crowd of kids searching for answers. A kid on a skateboard told me there had been a crash at the end of the road, and I remembered my siblings. I headed toward the school, feeling sick to my stomach. I found them among a group of kids sitting on the sidewalk, looking dazed. They didn't react when I tried to hug them. Sarah's eyes were vacant, unseeing caverns staring into oblivion. Nathaniel wouldn't look me in the eye, squeezing me a little too tightly, pressing his head into my shoulder, still stained with our mother. He was a shell of his former self, the brother I had playfully fought with just hours earlier because he refused to let me drive his car. Sarah had wanted to ride the bus, and in a mark of rebellion, Nathaniel had followed her. If they had decided to drive to school, they could have been dead. Nathaniel dropped his head into his lap, panting into his jeans. Sarah kept shooting me hopeful looks, like I would know what to do. 2 years younger than me, my little sister was already looking at me as if I were an adult. Their bus had overturned, intense red seeping onto the road, shattered windows, and headless bodies littering the sidewalk. Kids wandered around, confused, covered in what remained of the bus driver. Nathaniel and Sarah seemed to be the only ones consciously awake, while others cried out for their parents. The three of us hugged, but I could barely feel my siblings wrapped around me. I had no idea how to tell them that our mother's blood was all over me. From their expressions, Nathaniel wrapping Sarah into a hug and my sister sobbing into his chest, they already knew. Our town had been normal, like every other, and in the blink of an eye, everything was gone. Parents, we were covered in them. Teachers, upon pushing through the school entrance, there was carnage. Traumatized 14-year-olds were hysterical, dripping in scarlet, while older kids seized the opportunity to run wild without adult authority, trashing classrooms and raiding vending machines. It was everyone. 99.9% of our town's population exploded that day, but it was my mother who was still staining my face, her blood ingrained into my flesh. I couldn't scrub her off of me, no matter what I did. The outside came to help in a matter of hours. I wouldn't call it help, though. According to the outside, we were a town going through an unprecedented event, which meant a quarantine cutting us off from the outside world. After briefing us in the school auditorium, we were told not to panic, and that help was coming. Spoiler alert, they were scared of us and what they thought was a contagion, so that so-called help didn't exist. That left babies without mothers, the preschoolers without parental figures, and an entire school of teenagers to fend for themselves. You would think a group of kids would like to know what to do in a town-wide apocalypse, right? Especially when we had been abandoned by the outside world. In the first few weeks, we went kind of insane. Lord of the Flies insane. If you were vocal, you became a leader. And that meant the popular kids started to take control, taking advantage of kids with no family and nothing to lose, and recruiting them into gangs. Thankfully, that stopped when help did eventually come. Several drones were sent into our quarantine zone 1 month into the town-wide lockdown. They brought boxes full of medical supplies, food, electronics, despite them turning off the internet 2 months later due to a breach in security. Wendy Carmichael had made a now-deleted Reddit post entitled, "We Are Trapped, the story of my town under quarantine." Wendy quickly became an outsider, after we were forced to hand over all of our electronics. There were also instructions on building a community in unprecedented times. We were told to elect a leader, a spokesperson who would make the rules. Gracie Lockhart became that person. She was the only one who wanted to run, and I guess everyone was scared of her because her now dead father happened to be mayor. Still though, kids wanted someone to look up to, someone to tell them what to do and give them a sense of purpose. Rules were put into place and everyone over the age of 13 was given a job, whether that was a cook at a university where meals were served or stuck in the preschool with the kids. In the first month, I was a delivery girl. When the electronics were still working, kids used all that pent-up frustration and trauma on shopping. So I would wake up at 5 a.m. every day, bike to the barriers standing between our town and the outside world, and pick up the growing mountain of Amazon packages dumped on our side. I enjoyed my time as a delivery girl. I used it as a distraction from thinking about Mom's death. I barely saw my brother and sister, apart from at night. The three of us had taken up residence in a random house we'd found. Sarah liked the swimming pool, but we chose it because it was far away from our parents. Sarah's job was at the kindergarten, which she hated with a passion, while Nathaniel was an unwilling member of the research committee. Not exactly a job that helped us, but Gracie and her carefully chosen counsel, who were just literally her friends, forced my brother and several others to scour the town and find out how this happened. Nathaniel said it was just an excuse for the popular kids to slack off. We already had a scientific explanation presented to us by the CDC themselves. It was a contagion that worked like spontaneous human combustion and seemed to be leaving children alone. Gracie's group were obsessed with this huge conspiracy that went from aliens to a lab leak at the local university where they were convinced biological weapons were being made. Nathaniel had requested several times to be given another job, but one particular girl in the research committee had a crush on my brother. With her being so close to Gracie and the newly instated town council, she had a certain amount of authority and could abuse it any way she wanted, and damn did she abuse it. Gradually, as it became progressively more obvious that the outside world had left us to rot, and our community started to run out of rations provided for us, the council began to take advantage of the amount of power they had. Sure, blame it on repressed trauma or PTSD, but I would go as far to say these kids were sociopaths. We called them the Dark Days, because in a matter of weeks, our world started to come apart. It started with a message from the outside that our food was delayed, so we starved. The kids in power started getting bored. Kids were refusing to work without food. Normal crashed and burned, humanity bleeding away into something else. Those in authoritative positions were no longer quietly plucking the good-looking guys and girls for their own personal pleasure. They were ordering our police force, a small group of volunteers, to drag them from their homes and present them to the council. Please bring all chocolate to the council. Guys with gross haircuts, I'm talking about you, Oliver Bentley, are no longer allowed inside the cafeteria. Cut your hair and look decent, or starve. Any cute dogs must be handed over. If you're physically attractive and want one of the last cans of soup, you can earn it. Only hot guys and girls. If you look like a hobbit, you'll be turned away. So yeah, normal began to crumble. That is crazy. We tried to uphold it, but when the council started using older kids as toys and playthings, that was when our little community fell apart. Nathaniel was one of those chosen to serve the council, in what started as a stupid announcement and quickly turned into a rule. Those who were chosen to be right hands to the council must not resist, or their loved ones would suffer. We were starving, delirious, and going crazy. Before our leader could go full Lord of the Flies, however, the outside world stepped in. Thank God. Gracie had had her leadership revoked, along with her council, and all of her orders were thankfully banned. Nathaniel and the others were freed. Sarah and I dragged him from a local hotel room, which looked innocent enough. We found him playing Switch games, cross-legged on the floor. According to Nathaniel, there was a lot of PG-13 non-consensual groping. He laughed it off, but there was an emptiness in his eyes I didn't like. His smile was too big. Sarah pointed out blood on the bed sheets, but I blocked it out, nodding dizzily when Nathaniel insisted he was fine. The perpetrator, who had my brother and 5 other senior girls and guys trapped in her hotel room fashioned into an S-den, was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in shame. I called it out as assault, and thankfully more kids spoke out. Gracie was indirectly arrested, meaning as soon as the quarantine was over, she and her little friends were in big trouble. I heard the charges were severe: forced imprisonment and non-consensual S. For the time being, they were put on house arrest. Thankfully, a new council was built from kids with actual intelligence and a passion for leadership. Liam Cartwright became our leader, and in his first role of replacement mayor, he demanded the soldiers bring us enough food and supplies to last us for a month. The outside world reluctantly complied, and we went back to normal-ish. The girl who assaulted my brother, Tally Edwards, was officially a missing person, which became our first real case. Liam put together a force of 10 able-bodied kids to act as a police force and investigate the girl's disappearance. I got my job back as a delivery girl. When our internet was cut off, though, I became a sort of food delivery service instead. But I liked it. There was something therapeutic about awaiting our daily shipments, watching the outside world continue while we had come to a grinding halt. A year passed, without parents, adults, and normality. But we made it work. We were a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds trying to keep afloat. Normal, but just like the outside world, death existed in our makeshift community too. 5 kids, mostly from neglect. Taryn James and her friends had found a dead baby inside of a wrecked car. A 15-year-old girl had jumped out of a tree on a dare and landed head first. 3 toddlers had come down with fevers that killed them, despite us having the right medical supplies. We might have had medicine, but the kids working at the hospital had no idea what they were doing. Why would they? The eldest was 17, and he ran away, puking into his hand. When the 15-year-old was brought in, half of her skull caved in. The outside world only helped us with food. The rest, we had to fend for ourselves. The assholes didn't even send in medics. In their words, it was a risk they couldn't take. Little kids were dying, but because of a phantom contagion that was yet to claim any more lives, they couldn't save them. Kids weren't just dying, they were disappearing too. The missing had doubled. 2 kids were gone now, both of them part of Gracie's original council, and Gracie herself had somehow managed to build her own little cult. She believed that God had taken her friends, and they simply had followed our parents to heaven. Judgment Day was a new one. The week before, Gracie was screaming about aliens and lights in the sky when I biked past the school, where a concerning number of followers sat in a circle around her. Now she was convinced her friends had been raptured. Cliques had formed around the town, which became noticeable on my bike ride. You can't be cut off from the outside without forming a cult-like group. But hey, we all had our ways of coping with losses we couldn't even register. I had my own group, my fellow delivery kids. We weren't exactly a cult, but we were a family, and we had cute lime green uniforms and caps. The sun was setting when I was starting my night shift, sitting on the barrier, my legs dangling. The sky was a smear of orange and red, and I found myself hypnotized by the dying sunlight illuminating the clouds. I wasn't technically allowed to sit on the barrier. If I fell off, I was donezo. But it was fun to get a peek into the outside world. If I tilted my head at just the right angle, I could see a fully functioning McDonald's in the distance, ironically bathed in a heavenly glow. Below me, the winding road was blocked off with yellow tape, barricades in place. Nathaniel was on my mind. His new job was taking up all his time, but when he was free, he still didn't come home. I told him to request a Zoom appointment with a therapist. The outside world was offering them every week in the library, where there was a restricted internet access, but he kept saying he was good. He seemed to like it on the outside. On the weekends, Nate would act like the annoying older brother he had always been, fighting over the shower and hiding cereal from Sarah and I. But even when he was laughing, his expression didn't match his eyes. I wanted to talk about what happened with him and Tally. Maybe he thought it was his fault she was missing. Sarah had told me to step off for a while, though this had been going on for months. It's like something inside was killing him, eating away at him. And I knew it was what happened inside that hotel suite. Testing, testing. A familiar draw crackled through my walkie-talkie, sticking out of my pocket and cutting through my thoughts. Nathaniel was fine, I thought. I was just overreacting. My colleague's voice was a welcome distraction, bleeding into the peaceful silence. The British accent was the icing on the cake. Do they have ramen? I repeat, we are short in our supply of ramen. He paused. Especially the carbonara-style ones. You know, the ones in the TikTok store? He sighed, his voice immediately bringing my mood up. Ah, yes, TikTok. I miss my daily supply of brain-rotting dopamine. Do you remember those pool-filling videos? They were what made me realize I had undiagnosed ADHD. Jude Lightwood was an unlikely friend. I barely knew him before the quarantine, and now I knew his deepest, darkest secrets he spilled to me during our night shift awaiting our weekly delivery. Jude took the other side of town, while I took the main entrance. We spent most of our time talking on the talkies, or in his case, giving me his entire life story. Still though, nothing beats staying up until the early hours of the morning, watching the first flicker of dawn appear in the sky. Listening to him half deliriously reenact the entire first season of Breaking Bad from memory. Yes, even with the voices. I missed a delivery once because I was almost on the edge of hysterics, laughing at his Jesse Pinkman impression, which was to a freaking T. Pulling out my talkie, I pressed the button, swinging my legs in midair. You do know they're MREs, right? I don't think we have a choice. We'll be lucky to get rice and chicken, I paused. Also, you don't seem like the type of guy who used to go on TikTok. He wasn't. Before the disaster, Jude spent most of his time in the school library. He was known for a side hustle, selling candy to seniors. He started as a British exchange student who nobody could really understand, and quickly rose up in the social hierarchy due to his accent. I only knew him from English class. When our teacher had asked him what the capital of Australia was, and Jude, half asleep, had responded with, "Huh? New Zealand?" He was officially New Zealand to me, until he formally introduced himself on my second day on the job, offering me coffee and spilling it all over himself. Jude scoffed. I enjoyed his presence, even if it was just his voice. I just said I watch pool filling videos, like in a total trance, he laughed, but then his voice kinda choked up. I could tell he was having a light bulb moment. He had them a lot, and they were all related to what happened to the town's adults. What if it's like gods? Jude had proclaimed into the whipping wind one morning, the two of us cycling to work. When I twisted around to shoot him a pointed look, he shrugged, cycling harder, reddish dark hair flying into blur around him. It's probable, like what if Zeus is pissed? He's punishing us. Aliens? He'd said while we were lifting packages onto the loading bay. I hit him with a package in my hands. Cthulhu? Jude mumbled, half asleep, the two of us labeling envelopes. What if it's microchips in our brains? Jude came out with it through a mouthful of mashed potato during lunch, the two of us lounging on the school roof. His second epiphany of the day, when I shoved him, he laughed. This guy's charming smile made it hard for me to hate him. He came up with these what ifs to drive me crazy, I swear. His theories stretched all the way to our town somehow being related to the Simpsons movie. Though this time, I caught a certain seriousness in his tone. What if that is what saved us? I pondered his question, watching a bird swoop across the sky. You think TikTok saved us from combusting? No, he laughed. Well, yes, stay with me here, but adults don't use it much, right? Jude took a deep breath. I could tell he had already jumped to the next tangent. Wait, I can see a group of kids in town across from us eating Five Guys. My mouth is watering, he groaned. This is torture. I can see the fried onions. I can see the animal-style fries and sauce. Geez, how good was his sight? Do you have binoculars? I couldn't resist a laugh. No, yes, maybe. I'm just borrowing them. Jude, I said, shuffling uncontrollably. My butt had gone to sleep. Are you sitting on the barrier? He didn't reply for a moment. That depends. Is a certain Liam Cartwright with you? I spluttered, holding the button down. You think our 17-year-old mayor is checking up on the delivery kids? Poor Liam is probably asleep. Oh God, yeah. I could sense him making a face. Our boy is starting to look like a divorced father of 3. Jude cleared his throat, and the feedback went right through me. I am sitting on the barrier, by the way. I can see Orion from here. I used to look at constellations with my mom. She had one of those cool ancient telescopes. Something sickly twisted in my gut, tipping my head back. I searched for the star, though I wasn't sure where I was looking. So you're looking through the tiny hole in the barrier? Mm-hmm, he chuckled. Curse my 20/20 vision. I wanted to get an idea of what normal life is like, and I get hit in the face with burgers. I want Five Guys so bad. I would kill for one. I could hear him adjusting the dial on the talkie. Did you know some people, desperate enough, would kill for takeout? There was a pause, and I heard his slight intake of breath, his shuffling crackling into interference. I didn't even have to reply. Jude never stopped talking. Don't you think this is kinda cool? Apart from the whole, end of the world, dystopian, only our town thing? I could see my breath dancing in front of me and zipped up my jacket, responding in a gasp. Freezing our asses off waiting for mediocre meals? No, like what we're doing. I feel like I'm keeping watch for the undead while my friends, the last survivors of humanity, sleep, Jude snorted. Instead, I'm a glorified Uber Eats delivery guy for a community of kids. You enjoy it though, I said through a yawn, rubbing my hands together. The early November chill was already seeping into my bones. He responded in a hum. It's aight. Jude sighed, leaving us both in a peaceful silence. How did you get on the barrier, Rhea? His question took me off guard, an ice-cold shiver rippling down my spine. What? Well, I have Ben to give me a hand to climb up. Even if he sleeps all the way through his shift, his bulky legs make up for it. But you're alone, so how exactly are you getting up there? He paused, and the shriek of feedback sent me jolting, immediately losing my concentration. Jude laughed, and I couldn't resist twisting around, scanning the empty road behind me. No sign of any life. My radio crackled, and I jumped for the first time in a while. Wait. Jude's tone had significantly darkened. So you're telling me you managed to scale a barrier this high with zero help? For a moment, my tongue was tangled. I stand on crates, I said, obviously. Jude hummed. Sounds like bullshit, Rhea. I tightened my grip on my talkie, fingering the off switch. Why do you care? Oh, I don't, he chuckled. I'm just curious how you learn how to climb this high. The silence that followed twisted my gut into knots. I could just hear Jude's breathing, and if I really listened out for it, the late evening traffic coming through the town over the barrier. Jude surprised me with a laugh. I'm just messing with you, Rhea. The night shift goes to my head, you know. I gotta find new ways of bantering with you. Sure, I said, but my chest was clenching. Oh man, I think my delivery is here. I gotta go before they spot me on the barrier, he panted. Over and out, or whatever you're supposed to say. Switching off the talkie and cutting off his farewell, a fresh slither crept down my spine. My delivery came soon after. 5,000 MREs. I tore into the first one, unable to help myself, but Jude's words were still in my mind, making me paranoid. Paranoia made me desperate. Being desperate made me remember how hungry I was. I was stuffing handfuls of cold rice and chicken into my mouth when the sour-faced man helping me unload the shipment cleared his throat. "You're supposed to microwave it, sweetheart." I ignored him. "Is this it?" I said through a mouthful of mush. Mush had never tasted so good. "No snacks?" He threw me a crushed Milky Way, making sure to keep his distance. "There's a snack. Knock yourself out." After spending all night delivering MREs to locked doors that were normally open and welcoming, I finally reached home with 3 ready to eat. I picked the best ones for my family: chili for Nathaniel, chicken and noodles for Sarah, and fried rice for me. When I opened the door, I was greeted to soft snores. My little sister sleeping on the couch, and Nathaniel wrapped up in a blanket on the floor. I pulled my food out of the package, threw it in the microwave, and then collapsed on the floor next to my brother. I was so tired. So damn tired I could barely move my legs. What did Jude say again? How exactly did you get onto the barrier, Rhea? The microwave dinging didn't wake me up. The stink of burning plastic and cremated food did. "Get up." The voice was familiar, pulling me out of my thoughts. When I didn't move, someone kicked me violently in the stomach, and something was dropped onto my head. I sat up, a scream clawing in my throat. The burned remnants of my dinner dripping down my face. Standing over me were 2 pairs of feet, and when I looked up, I glimpsed Gracie Lockhart. She made sense. She was a psycho, but not Liam, our mayor, who was supposed to be sane. "Get up." This time I was kicked in the head. I felt my brain bounce around my skull, my vision blurring. I was on my feet, off balance. All around me was a startling orange. I thought it was from the microwave catching fire, but then the blurred orange was moving. Gracie, Liam, and 2 other guys held flaming torches. The light was mesmerizing. I found myself transfixed until I snapped out of it. Nathaniel was in front of me, his arms bound behind his back. A squeaking, muffling Sarah was struggling in between 2 girls' grasp. I found my voice. What's going on?" My arms were violently pinned behind my back. When I twisted around, I found myself eye to eye with my best friend. Jude wore a hooded sweatshirt, his curls hidden underneath. He didn't meet my gaze, shoving me toward the door along with the others. "Witch." Gracie spat in my face before yanking me out of the house and throwing me to my knees. I tried to lift my head, but Gracie stomped on my back and I bit back a shriek. Nathaniel and Sarah were thrown down next to me, and I stared at the reflection in my brother's eyes, following the orange glow that lit up the darkness. In front of us, a horde of kids stood, all holding torches burning bright. "We found them," Gracie cried to the crowd, and they cheered, a psychotic hive mind thirsty for our blood. "We have found the evil who did this to our parents, who trapped us." She had to be kidding, right? Nathaniel shook his head, eyes wide. "What? You're serious?" Gracie crouched in front of us and held up her phone. Her evidence was a screenshot of a tweet posted the same day the adults exploded. It only read, "The Sinclairs are witches," posted from an account with 0 followers, 0 likes, and a default profile picture. Panic crept into my gut. The town was already losing their minds from isolation and starvation. Could they really believe we had started this? "Jude," I found my voice, a sharp squeak I didn't trust. When Gracie screamed, "Blood for blood," and forced me to my feet by my hair, I caught his eye in the crowd. "Jude, I'm not a witch." "You killed my mom," he said in a whisper, a demented laugh slipping through his lips. "She was all over me, and I couldn't breathe. Her blood was stuck to me. She was everywhere, Rhea." "You know me," I managed to cry out. "Jude, you know this is bullshit." He didn't reply, his expression hardening. I wish I could have seen a glitter of influence in his eyes, but it was all him. Jude's fear had turned him into a monster. "Burn the witch," he said in a whimper, his lip curling. The boy's expression contorted. His hiss became a yell, cutting through the crowd's screams. "Burn them," the crowd hollered. I stopped fighting when we were dragged through town, rotten food and soiled diapers thrown in our faces. I knew where we were headed, and my body had gone numb, Nathaniel stayed still, silent, his dark eyes finding his friends in the crowd. Sarah screamed, sobbing, begging to a group of kids who already decided her fate. It was Jude who shoved me against our founder tree, binding me to my siblings. It was Jude who stepped back, gripping his torch for dear life. They surrounded us, a ring of blazing fire and expressions riddled with excitement. Gracie stepped forward, Liam by her side. I knew in her messed up little mind killing us would bring back the adults. And she had spread the word, like a virus, polluting the town's minds. Rhea Sinclair, she stepped in front of me, then the others. Nathan Sinclair. She was gentle with my sister, forcing Sarah's head up with the tip of her manicure. And Sarah Sinclair. We find you guilty of witchcraft, she said. Your sentence is burning in the pits of hell where you belong. I didn't take her seriously, not even with a burning torch in her grasp, until the girl pulled out a knife from her pocket. I turned my attention to the sky when the blade was drawn across my sobbing sister's throat. When her cries gurgled and deep, dark red spotted the earth, I looked at the moon poking from the clouds instead. I didn't see my sister die. I just saw her body slump over, her head of dark brown curls hanging in her face. The crowd's reaction was haunting. Calls for my sister's head to be severed and waved in the air in triumph. I kept my gaze on the sky, tears filling my eyes. Nate, I managed to get out. She's dead, I wanted to scream. Our sister is dead. Nate, I screamed. He didn't reply, even when Gracie knelt in front of him and dragged the blade of the knife down his own cheek and forcing him to look at her with the tip of her nail. You're a murderer, he said in a whimper, only for her to spit in his face. Nathaniel didn't blink, struggling in his restraints. Witch, Gracie Lockhart snarled at him, pressing the knife deeper. You're a filthy witch, Nathaniel Sinclair. I don't know what sealed the deal. Was it Gracie parading my sister's body in front of him or spitting in his face? I could feel it already, icy prickles creeping down my bare arms, already playing with strands of my hair. When I twisted my head, Nathaniel was smiling. I saw the contortion in his cheeks, amusement morphing into agony, unnatural darkness spiderwebbing across his pupils. Velvet magic. He stunk of it. I knew the asshole was using it. Velvet magic, also known as possession magic, had been banned a long time ago. It is to witches what drugs are to humans, addictive, drawn from dark energy that humans naturally make. It is well known to take over the mind and soul of the witch possessing it. If my brother had been using velvet magic, he was doing so with purpose. Oh, okay, so they are actually witches. Alright, yeah, no, it's their fault, 100%. I was too, but I was inexperienced. Just like my mother said that morning, only when I turned 18 would I be able to experiment with possession magic. I have a confession. What I wrote at the start wasn't the complete truth. Yes, I did scream at my mother. How was I supposed to know screw off and die would actually work? And more so, how would I know it would take out half of the town? Nathaniel was our family witch. Why was he using velvet magic in the first place? I'd secretly been tearing myself apart for a year over my magic being the cause of our town-wide disaster. Was I wrong? Did he kill the adults? I should have been horrified when Gracie's brain started to leak out of her ears. Except she murdered my sister and had bound me to a tree, led a government that assaulted my brother. The girl squeaked, slamming her hand over her mouth, smearing red dripping down her face. Nate, I shot him a look, but I don't think he saw it. Nathaniel just saw our little sister's dead body. I lost my breath when, with a single flick of his finger behind his back, Gracie's head was splitting apart, her delighted grin twisting into horror. She didn't even get to feel it, a mercy I knew the bitch didn't deserve. When a chunk of the girl's skull landed on the ground, lips still split into a grotesque skeletal grin, the crowd went silent. Before, screams. Gracie's body hit the ground and then caught a light, flames dancing across her skin. Without a word, Nathaniel calmly pulled apart his restraints, and with a single jerk of his wrist, an agonizing scream escaping his lips, his eyes filled with black, sent the crowd flying several feet. I watched kids thrown back, helpless dolls caught in an invisible wind. One boy slammed into a tree, his body crumpling. A girl bisected on a wire fence. I didn't realize how powerful my brother really was. I should have cared about them, cared that they were dying, hurting, but they had murdered my sister. When Nate dropped his hands, his gaze found mine, and he opened his mouth, but his words were drowned out by mechanical shrieking from above us. Looking up, a helicopter was hovering, and I remembered my mom's words. "Do not draw attention to yourselves, do you hear me?" Her words echoed in my mind when another helicopter appeared. "These are bad people, Rhea, bad witches looking for us, and if they find us, they'll kill us. Our entire coven in this town. They'll burn it to the ground." Nathaniel ignored the presence in the sky, wrapping his arms around me, squeezing me into a hug. The darkness in his eyes, spiderwebbing across his face, was something else. Velvet magic. He was consumed by it, drowning darkness. But I didn't hate it. If he was going to avenge Sarah, then so be it. 1,500. His voice contorted into a giggle, which wasn't my brother's. Mom taught us about possession magic. It converts witches, filling their minds with dark influence. But I wanted it to fill him. If he was going to save our sister. Blood for blood. Before I could respond, rough hands were on my bindings, tugging them apart. "Come on," a voice hissed out. But I was watching my brother scoop Sarah's body into his arms. "Are you stupid? Do you really want to hang around and let yourself be caught?" I was dizzy, dragged by a shadow I fought against, but I was too weak, my magic rolling right off of him. "They're rounding up witches, idiot." The shadow's voice bled into one I knew. Jude. Immediately, I twisted around, aiming a kick to his face, which he easily dodged, grabbing my shoulders. I glimpsed that exact same flicker of darkness in his eyes. Velvet magic. The asshole was one of us, hiding in plain sight, and didn't save my sister. In fact, the bastard watched. He dragged me back, pulling me into a clearing when the crowd started screaming. This time led by Liam. Nathaniel had killed at least 10 kids. When I risked a look, my brother was carrying my sister away, unfazed by the yells from above, telling him to stay where he was. When sparks of dazzling purple hit the ground like fireworks, I realized the people shooting at us were not human. Witches. Jude's lips latched to my ear, his breath ice cold. "Your idiot brother just gave them a reason to start hunting us down, and the Sinclairs are at the top of their list. So if I were you," he spoke through gritted teeth, "I would start running." Okay, so I wish that I could forget that I read that story so I could read it again. That was really good, and I seriously, I want to be notified when there's a part 2 of this out. Trash Tia never fails to deliver. This next one, I like this next one. It goes from 0 to Underworld Spirit Guide real quick. The next story is from r/scary stories from user 1001 Nights. The Psychopomp. Jane's ability to escort the souls of the recently dead to where they needed to go kicked in as soon as she hit puberty, which, coincidentally or not, happened around the same time her father died. Jane was actually with him when it happened. One minute, Dad was parking the car, then telling her to run ahead. He's feeling a bit off. He'll catch up in a second. The next, he tumbled out of the car and spilled onto the pavement, clutching his heart. And then, the next minute, Jane was holding his hand, walking with him in a wide gray wasteland, walking towards a still lake. They both stayed quiet. There didn't seem to be much to say. She watched him get into the boat and waved goodbye. He nervously twitched his arm in response. The ancients never lied. We just stopped listening. Jane returned home as the boat drifted off out of sight. Dad's body was motionless on the pavement. They had just returned from soccer. Jane remembered how chilly the winds were against her bare legs. She saw Mom run out, her mouth twisted open. She could hear her crying out. Dad was just the first. Fortunately, Jane was only the psychopomp for those who died in her vicinity. But even so, she seemed to be quite busy. Grandmother, Dad's mother, didn't outlive her son for very long. Jane still remembers the walk towards the lake with her, holding her hand, which was now young and smooth-skinned and strong. Her eyes glowing with happiness in the gray light. Jane understood that grandmother was happy to see her son, and she wasn't confused and bewildered like poor Dad had been. But that made Jane feel sad too. It didn't feel right, to be so happy to be dead. But who was she to say so? Grandmother almost ran to the boat, which was waiting for her, barely remembering to look around to Jane, who felt quite left out, standing on the shore by herself. After that, it was Sadie. Jane had crushed on Sadie, like most other kids on the block. Sadie had long golden red hair and very sparkly eyes, and she was very friendly too. Not stuck up and not too good to talk to her, like the most popular and pretty girls were. They saw each other all the time, and Jane wasn't sure if they were friends or not, but she knew if someone asked Sadie, she would say they were friends, but then Sadie would say she was friends with everyone, and she'd be right. Anyway, it was a hit and run. She was lying all twisted up and bloody on the pavement right outside Jane's house. But it wasn't like when Jane's dad had died on the pavement. It was a million times worse. Jane held Sadie's hand firmly because Sadie wanted to get away. She wanted to walk away from the gray wasteland, right back into her home, but of course she couldn't. Then she realized she couldn't, and she opened her mouth and screamed, howled and screamed into the gray winds. Her pretty face, already crushed from the accident, distorting even more. And Jane held her hand and waited for the moment to pass, for Sadie to get into the boat and leave. The moment passed. Sadie stopped howling into the grayness, hugged Jane, and got into the boat. Her hair still looking golden red, even in the gray dimness. And Jabe could see it for a very long time. After she stopped seeing it, she returned home, where there was no Sadie to try and hang around. Years passed. Jane kept doing what she had to do. Friends, family, passerby, neighbors. Prom night happened, and the inevitable car crash with the silly drunk kid at the wheel, wrapping the car around a truck and getting himself and his 3 passengers all killed. The girls' beautiful shiny dresses all splattered with blood. They didn't all die at once. Jane took them across the gray wasteland 2 by 2. Bonnie, who was in Spanish and math with her in school, and the other guy who was new to town, she didn't know his name, holding their hands firmly. And then she came back for the other 2. Bonnie called out for her mom as Jane walked away, and Jane thought she was probably confused by the crash, or maybe not. The other girl, Carla, she lashed out at her prom date, the drunk driver, shrieking at him for killing them and tried to scratch him up with her gorgeous, shiny, hard-lacquered nails. She had sparkling gemstones in her nails, and Jane thought it must have hurt when she dragged them across the drunk boy's face, but of course, it didn't. He was quite dead by then, and Carla saw she couldn't hurt him and it was useless, and stopped trying. Jane held her hand and felt the hard, scratchy, pointed nails dig into her palms, but they left no mark, because Carla, by then, was quite dead too. The boat waited to take all 4 of them, Carla, Bonnie, and their dates. Jane waved goodbye to them, but they didn't take any notice. One time, a few years later, she was in another neighborhood, not her own, and something went wrong. People were angry, upset, and shouting. Jane was trying to get away and get home. She hadn't meant to be there. She couldn't leave her mom alone for long, but then police arrived. Jane was confused. There was a mass of people shoving and pushing. She was just trying to get out. Then there were shots. Someone fell. Blood. People were screaming. And then she was walking in the familiar gray with a stranger, half their face blown off. She sighed. She didn't need to hold his hand too tightly, even though the stranger had small children and family and hadn't gone out expecting to die. The stranger was very kind to her, which was wrong. She knew, but it was what it is. And even thanked Jane, which was completely unnecessary because it wasn't like Jane had any choice in the matter. After he got into the boat, he waved back and smiled at Jane, and Jane smiled back. Now Jane is old. She spends time in a nursing home, and of course, she is as busy as ever. She hasn't become used to it. How could she be? But she does wonder, who will take her when her time, not too long now, comes? Who will hold her hand in the dim grayness and guide her towards the lake? She looks at her friends, their gentle, fallen, kind, confused faces. At the aides and nurses, so bright and bustling, so tired and annoyed, and wonders. She hopes it couldn't be Clara, Complaining Clara, they called her. And it had better not be Louisa, who steals from them. Of that they are all sure. Also, she's not particularly gentle or kind. No, she would be a terrible psychopomp. Jane hopes she will have the pleasure of escorting Louisa herself, although that is unlikely since she's only 22. Soon, Jane will find out. Wow, what a wild power to have. Man, who would want that power of escorting people into the afterlife? Jeez, yeah, what a heavy task to be burdened with. I don't know, would you guys want that job? Let me know what you think. Okay, so this next one isn't outwardly wrong or disturbing from the very beginning, but the clues are there if you're looking for them. The next one's from r/scary stories from user Twisted Urban Tales. I kept finding the same sticker in library books. The reason was horrifying. In sophomore year of high school, I practically lived in the library. I'd go there almost every day after school to sit and read. Then I'd borrow a stack of books, mostly history, and finish them at home before they were due back. It was routine at that point. That's why I noticed it straight away. I opened a book I'd borrowed about medieval Europe and saw a small white sticker stuck firmly to one of the pages. I leaned in and took a closer look. The sticker was a prescription bottle label. The edges were worn and it had been pieced together in two halves. One side was faded to a thin film. It had been peeled off and reapplied, but I could still read the text. At the top was the name of a pharmacy and a date, and below there were some details. Theodore Hargreaves, an address list below. Lisinopril 10 milligrams. Take 1 tablet by mouth every day. I didn't recognize the medication, but I recognized the name. It was Mr. Hargreaves, my history teacher. I saw teachers and students from my school regularly at this library, so I didn't think much of it at the time. But I still stared at it for a second longer than I probably should have. Then I figured it was a mistake and left it there. He must have been using it as a bookmark and forgotten. I didn't want to peel it off and risk tearing the page. The second time, it caught my attention immediately. Different history book, another label, same name, address, and medication. This time it was stuck deeper into the book on one of the middle pages. I flipped back a few pages, then forward. Nothing else, just that one sticker. I remember thinking it was a strange thing to use as a bookmark. By the 4th or 5th time, it stopped feeling like a coincidence. Always the same sticker with his name stuck on a random page. I went to the library one morning to return a book, well, before I'd normally go after school, and saw him there. He was exactly the same as he was in class, friendly and relaxed. "Good to see you're reading," he said with a smile. I greeted him and we made some small talk. I almost mentioned seeing the labels, but then I stopped myself. Something made me feel like I wasn't supposed to. At the end of our conversation, I just smiled and left. A few afternoons later, I was back in the library. I went to the history section and plucked a book off the shelf, flipping it open without thinking. Sure enough, there it was again. Mr. Hargreaves, prescription label, pressed flat on one of the pages. Just then, a voice snapped me out of my trance. "Hey, how's it going?" I looked up. My friend Matt was standing in front of me, hands in his pockets. Matt didn't come here often. He lived further out, on the edge of town. "I didn't know you even knew where the library was," I remarked. "Ha ha, very funny. I was nearby." We talked for a bit, and then I held up the book slightly. "Look at this. I keep finding Mr. Hargreaves' stickers in these books." He stepped closer and scanned the text. A messenger asked for help from nearby towns. I tapped on the label below it, pressed flat against the page. Matt leaned in and squinted as he read the details on the faded sticker. "Huh, he lives a few streets away from me. Who knew?" "Why would he be putting these in library books?" I asked. Matt shrugged. "I mean, probably just uses whatever's lying around as a bookmark." "That's what I thought the first time," I said. I plucked 2 more books off the shelf nearby that I'd put back a while ago, which I remembered seeing the stickers in. He keeps putting them in books. I reached for a book about wars. Took a moment to find the label, but I knew roughly where it was. Many families were trapped as supplies began to run out. I ran my finger across the label below it. Then I put it back on the shelf and opened the 3rd book. A few managed to escape, though most were. Underneath was the label again, in a chapter about famine. He glanced at it, then back at me, looking mildly amused. Maybe he's just weird. After Matt left that afternoon, I sat at a table with the books I'd taken from the shelf laid out in front of me. I frowned, then shook it off and closed the books, carrying them back to the shelf. A few months passed. I still saw the labels in books every now and then, but I stopped paying much attention to them. I didn't think about them again until I was talking to Matt at school one afternoon, leaning against the lockers while people moved around us between classes. You know those labels you were talking about? He smirked slightly. Yeah? I walk past that house all the time, he said. Ever since I found out that's Hargreaves' address, I can't not notice it. Weird knowing a teacher lives that close to me. I shrugged. They have to live somewhere. Then a pause as he glanced down the hallway. I've heard stuff from inside a few times when I walk past. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of stuff? He frowned, like he was trying to decide if it even sounded strange out loud. Like one night, I heard something scraping, I guess, and once I thought I heard knocking or something, but like from inside of his door. He made a small motion with his hand, tapping against the locker beside him. Then there was a brief silence between us. Anyway, he added, straightening up, probably nothing. That afternoon at the library, I found myself thinking about the labels. I pulled out a few books from the history section and started looking for them. As I found them again, one by one, I noticed something concerning for the first time. A line of text above each sticker. A messenger asked for help from nearby towns. Many families were trapped as supplies began to run out. A few managed to escape, though most were. I swallowed and looked in 2 more books. Efforts to seek help from neighboring regions. A group managed to escape though some were. My heart started to race. I put the books down immediately and texted Matt. Hey, can you show me where Hargreaves' house is? I would have just called the police at this point. I feel like that's enough. By the time we got there, it was just starting to get dark. The street was quiet, with a few distant figures occasionally walking past under the streetlights. Mr. Hargreaves' house sat halfway down the road, curtains drawn, no lights on. The same address shown on the prescription labels stuck in the books. Matt slowed beside me, hands in his pockets as he glanced at it. Looks the same as it always does, he shrugged. What do you think you'd find? I didn't respond. I couldn't stop staring at it. We should probably go, he added with a sigh, before he sees teenagers from his school just standing outside his house. That's going to be hard to explain. I nodded slowly. Yeah, you're right. We turned and started walking back the way we came. We'd barely made it a few steps when Matt stopped. I almost walked into him. What? I asked. He didn't answer straight away, just tilted his head slightly, listening. Then I heard it too. A dull, hollow sound. Knock. Then again. Knock. Knock. My heart started racing as Matt turned back toward the house. That's it, he said quietly. That's what I was talking about. We both stood there for a second, then walked back towards the house. The front porch creaked slightly as we stepped onto it. The sound came again, louder now, from somewhere just beyond the front window. The curtains were drawn, but not fully. There was a small gap where the fabric didn't quite meet. Matt leaned in slightly. That's weird, he murmured. I don't remember that. He pointed, and I followed his gaze. Behind the curtain, barely visible in the darkness, were wooden boards running horizontally across the window. I felt a chill run through me. His curtains are always closed, Matt said with a frown. Wonder why there's wood all behind it. Another knock. Then the curtain shifted slightly. Something moved behind it. I sucked in a breath. Did you see? Yeah, Matt whispered. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and turned on the torch, aiming it through the curtains. The light cut through the gap between the boards. An eye, open wide, staring straight back at us. We screamed and stumbled backwards. Matt grabbed my arm. What the hell? The knocking stopped instantly. Silence. Then we heard footsteps from inside the house. We ran. Down the porch steps, onto the pavement, away from the house as fast as we could. We didn't stop until we were halfway down the street. My chest was tight, my breathing uneven as I fumbled for my phone. "Call them," Matt said. I told the police everything, the books, the labels, the sounds, the eye staring at us through the window. My voice was shaking so badly I could barely get the words out. By morning, everyone knew. Mr. Hargreaves had been arrested and the house had been sealed off. Inside, they'd found a girl. She was 14, only a few years younger than the both of us. She'd gone missing around 3 years ago, from a different state hundreds of miles away. Taken, transported, and kept hidden somewhere no one would think to look. A normal house on a quiet street. Locked away in his house for 3 years, she'd been peeling the prescription labels off empty medication bottles and boxes, whatever she could find in his bin with his address on it without being noticed. Pressing them carefully between pages of books he brought home from the library and would eventually have to return. She couldn't write any messages. If he saw even a mark out of place, there was no telling what he would do. So she worked with what she had, looking through the words in the books and placing labels with his address under specific words, underlining them with the stickers. Hoping someone, anyone, would notice that she was trapped, needed help, and was unable to escape. It had been right there the whole time. I kept thinking about how many times I'd seen those labels and dismissed them as something harmless before putting them back on the shelf. If we hadn't gone there that day, she might have never left that house again. I think the lesson that we can all learn from this one is that something might seem like a small coincidence, but it might not be a coincidence. Might want to check up on it. Spoiler alert, the OP's husband in this next one instantly tries to convince them that they never had their daughter that is, exists. The next one is from r/scary stories. It's titled, "My husband told me we never had a daughter. The terrifying part is that I almost believed him." I need you to understand something before I start. I'm a primary school teacher. I'm not dramatic. I do not catastrophize. I correct children's spelling and pack lunches and know every parent's name and their dog's name and which kid needs an extra 5 minutes. I'm the most grounded person I know. I'm telling you this because what I'm about to write sounds like the confession of someone who isn't. Her name is Ellie. She's 18 months old. She has her father's jaw and my eyes and a way of destroying every block tower she builds immediately after completing it, like she's testing a theory about impermanence. She says 4 words. She smells like warm bread after a bath. When I sing a specific song, 3 lines, a melody I made up in the dark during a 4 a.m. feed, she stops whatever she's doing and turns toward the sound. I know she's real. I know she's real because I found her shoe behind the radiator. Let me go back. Leo and I met in a bookshop. He took a book off the shelf before I could reach it and held it out to me with a half-apologetic smile. Force of habit, sorry. He'd read it 3 times. He didn't follow me when I walked away. That was the first thing I noticed about him. Most men would have. Leo didn't chase. He positioned. He was interesting and he let me decide. I decided. He was the managing director of M&A, an investment bank. He was charming in a way that made you feel specifically chosen rather than generally approved of. He remembered everything. The exact words of a conversation from 6 months prior. The name of a student I'd mentioned once in passing. You were listening, and he'd say, I always listen. I thought that was love. I now know what it actually was. He wasn't storing memories. He was building a key. We married 3 years after the bookshop. Ellie came 18 months later. We had a house with a garden and neighbors we liked, Sarah and David Henderson. Warm people, the kind who bring you food when you're ill, and a life that looked, from every angle I could find, like the thing you spend your 20s hoping for. And then slowly, almost imperceptibly, it started. The first thing was small. We were at dinner, the 3 of us, normal Tuesday, and mid-sentence Leo just stopped. Not paused to think, stopped. Eyes open, completely present, but displaying nothing, like a screen that's on but not running anything. Leo? Nothing. Leo. He blinked, continued the sentence from exactly where he left off. Same tone, same pace, as if no time had passed. You just stopped. What? Mid-sentence, you just stopped and stared at me. Lisa, I didn't stop. I was talking. I let it go. I was tired. Ellie wasn't sleeping through yet, and I was running on 4 hours most nights. I told myself it was the kind of thing tired people imagine. The next week, the coffee mug in the wrong place. A conversation I remembered differently from him. Furniture shifted by a few inches. Not moved exactly, just off. Like a photograph hung slightly wrong. I'd come home once to find him sitting in the living room with the TV off, watching my reflection in the dark screen. He didn't know I'd seen. Each thing, small. Each thing, deniable. Each thing, mine to explain away. I started explaining a lot of things away. I confronted him eventually. Calmly, I sat down with him after Ellie was in bed and I laid out my examples carefully, the way I'd worked up to it for weeks. He listened all the way through. When I finished, he paused. Then, how long have you been feeling this way? Not answering me, turning it. He told me I hadn't been sleeping properly, that sleep deprivation causes memory distortion, that I'd been under stress since going back to work. He touched my face with the specific touch I loved. Come back to bed. I went. 3 days later, he told me he'd spoken to a psychiatrist, just to get some context. He suggested we come in together, or you could go alone, whatever feels right. I just want you to feel better. Dr. Reeves was in his 50s, patient and professional. His office was designed to feel safe. I talked, he listened, and he took notes. His notepad was open when I sat down. 2 words already written. Husband concerned. I didn't register it properly at the time. I do now, though. He started bringing me tea before bed. I don't know exactly when the medication changed. Dr. Reeves had prescribed something mild, something to help with sleep and anxiety. Leo started making the tea around the same time. It seemed caring. It seemed like exactly the sort of thing he would do. The nightmares started on the 3rd night. Ellie's room, Leo standing over her crib. He turns, the knife in his hand, his face completely calm. He picks her up. I try to scream and nothing comes out. I woke gasping, Leo beside me, peaceful, asleep. I went to Ellie's room and stood in the doorway until my breathing slowed. She was fine. I told myself it was the new medication, but I didn't tell Leo. The nightmares escalated. 3 nights running, each longer, more specific. The 3rd time I woke up screaming, and Leo was already holding me. Already there before I fully surfaced. His arms around me, his face against my hair. His eyes open in the dark, looking at nothing. I was too frightened to think about how he was already awake. I lost a Friday night. This is the part that's hardest to write because I still don't have full access to it. I remember a bath, a glass of wine Leo had poured, closing my eyes, and then I woke up in bed on Saturday morning with damp hair and my pajamas on and no memory of getting out of the water. I went downstairs. The living room stopped me in the doorway. Same room, same dimensions, same bones, but the curtains were different. Photos on the wall showing things I didn't remember. A Venice trip I had no memory of. Occasions I couldn't place. A version of our life I didn't recognize. Like someone had taken everything familiar and shifted it 3 degrees. Leo managed it with complete warmth. He named the Venice anniversary. He reminded me of the restaurant, the dress I'd worn, the thing I said on the bridge, and the horrible part, the part I can't fully forgive myself for, is that I almost remembered. I let him hold me. Over my shoulder, his face was nothing. The expression of a man waiting. I think I need to see someone. I've been thinking the same thing. He hit me on a Thursday. Normal Thursday, good dinner, half a bottle of wine. Ellie in bed. I was telling him something funny from school. I was telling it well. He was laughing at the right moments. And I turned to put a plate in the rack. He hit me so hard, I went into the counter edge first. I didn't understand what had happened. No pain yet, just the world had stopped making grammatical sense. I turned toward him, and the second one put me on the floor. He crouched beside me, not enraged, not out of control, with the same energy he uses for everything. Measured, deliberate, and focused. He hit me the way he closes a deal, like finishing a task. His face the whole time was neutral, present, and he was completely silent. No grunt of effort, no change in breathing. I stopped trying to get up after the second time. Something animal understood that movement was making it worse. I went still and I looked at Ellie's plastic cup by the fridge, and I focused on it completely while the room went strange around the edges. Then he stopped. Not because I did anything. He was just done. He stood up, straightened, looked at me on the floor with that same neutral assessment, and then he stepped over me. Not past me. Over me. And he went upstairs. I got up. I turned off the tap he'd left running, and I put cling film over the leftovers and put them in the fridge. I wiped down the counter and washed the plates, and dried them and put them away. I cleaned the kitchen because my brain needed something to do that made sense. If I could just make the kitchen normal, maybe the last 10 minutes hadn't happened the way I thought they did. I got into bed beside him. I lay in the dark, not knowing if he was asleep. I didn't know which would be worse. I woke up on Sunday. 2 days gone. My body felt wrong in a way that wasn't quite pain. More like a wrongness that had been distributed evenly through everything. Leo was sitting up beside me reading, coffee on the bedside table, like every Sunday morning of our marriage. He told me I'd had an episode, the worst yet, that he'd come downstairs and I hadn't recognized him, that I was aggressive, that I'd hurt myself against the counter, that he and Dr. Reeves had gotten me upstairs between them. I took your memory of being beaten, kept the kitchen, the floor, the pain, replaced the cause. I know that now. I didn't know it then. I just knew that I looked at my arms and there was nothing. No marks, completely clean. And I couldn't find Thursday. And Leo's hands came over mine on the breakfast table, and I asked him, "Did you hit me?" He looked at me with something that looked like heartbreak. "Is that what you think happened?" "I don't know what I think. I know," a pause, "I know you don't." Said so gently. I looked over at his hand over mine, the specific hand I had held for 7 years. I didn't pull away, because pulling away would have meant deciding, and I didn't have enough ground under my feet to decide anything. He took Ellie on a Wednesday night. I know that's when because the shoe was still by the crib on Tuesday. I know because I had kissed her goodnight and sung the song, and she had turned toward my voice and gone to sleep with her arms out, the way she always did. He brought me tea before bed. I drank it. I followed him upstairs. All right, so this is either some top tier gaslighting, or maybe all right, every time she has an episode, I notice that he gets her a drink. So maybe he's drugging her. Anyways, I woke up and reached toward the crib, and my hand closed on air. I went to her room. A room, bare, clean, and wrong. I opened the wardrobe, empty. I got on my knees and opened the toy drawer, empty. I checked behind the curtains and under the changing table and inside the wardrobe again, as if the second time would produce different results. Leo appeared in the doorway, sleep-rumpled and genuinely confused. Where is she? Who? Where's Ellie? Where's my daughter? His face, the specific tragedy of his face. We never had a child. I went through every room. Ellie had been removed from every surface of my life, every photograph, every toy, every piece of clothing. 7 words, and she was gone from the world as thoroughly as if she had never been in it. I came back to Leo standing in the hallway watching me search, and I stopped, in the middle of the hall, and went quiet. Not breakdown, not rage, just silence, where a person used to be. Leo held me on the floor, his arms around me, his voice low and steady, the voice I had loved for 7 years. I'm here. I'm right here. I sat inside his arms, inside his house, inside the reality he had built around me, completely alone. I found the photograph 3 days later. Reaching into the back of the closet, my hand found a corner of something caught behind the winter coats. I pulled it out. 3 people, me, Leo, and Ellie. She is real. She was here. She's real. I heard his car in the driveway. I tucked it inside my waistband, stood up, and went to start dinner. That night, he brought me my pill. I looked at it in my palm. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Careful, small, slightly behind my own eyes, but underneath that, still there. Still there. I put the pill in my pocket, got into bed, Leo beside me reading. Did you take it? A beat. Yes. I lay in the dark with the pill in my fist, eyes open, clearer than I had been in months. Some hours later, I felt a tap on my shoulder, gentle and deliberate, but I didn't move, didn't change my breathing. I heard a drawer, the sound of something lifted, considered replaced. Leo getting back into bed. I found out later what he had been holding. I don't need to write it here, you can work it out. In the morning, I made tea while he showered. I packed only what fit in one bag. I moved through the house with the deliberateness of someone who has been planning something in their head for days without admitting it. I went to the Hendersons, and I was going to ask Sarah to call the police. I had the photograph. I had the shoe I'd found behind the radiator. I was going to show her the room at the back of the closet. The small room with toys arranged on a shelf and children's books stacked neatly, and a name written carefully on the wall in soft letters. Ellie. Sarah opened the door with her warm, worried face. Please, I need to call the police. I have proof. There's a room in my house. She stepped aside to let me in, and I heard it. From somewhere deeper in the house, the small sound a baby makes when they stir without fully waking. My body knew before my mind did. My eyes went past Sarah's shoulder and down the hallway, and there, in the dim light, a cradle. She had been here. Every night I lay in that house being taken apart, my daughter was a wall away. Every morning I woke up beside the man who told me she didn't exist. She was sleeping in that cradle, 20 feet from our front door. Sarah moved between me and the corridor, gentle and instinctive. She already had her phone in hand. He's worried about you. We all are. I looked past her. Ellie was awake now. A tiny arm appeared above the cradle's edge, reaching. The reaching of a baby who senses their mother is near. My hand came up without my choosing it, fingers spread. Reaching back across 20 feet of the hallway, everything he'd put between us. Sarah shifted slightly, blocking more of the corridor, still talking, still completely certain she was doing the right thing. I looked at my daughter for a long time. Then I turned. Not heroically, my body just moved, because staying was no longer something I could physically do. Leo was standing at the end of our driveway when I got outside. Not blocking me, not threatening, just standing there, hands at his sides. With that quality he has of making you feel like the only thing in his field of vision. He didn't need to do anything, he just stood there, and I stopped. I walked toward him slowly, stopped a few feet away. The room. That was all I said, not a question, just the room. He looked at me and did something more disturbing than dropping the mask. He looked almost sad. One final attempt, even here, even now. Lisa, come inside. You're not well. I didn't argue. I just looked at him with the clearest eyes I'd had in months. I know what you did. Something changed in his face. The warmth switched off like a light. What was underneath wasn't monstrous. That would have been easier. It was just empty. The faintest trace of something that wasn't quite a smile. A man who finds a minor development mildly interesting. So you found out. Not surprised, not angry. I asked him the only question that mattered, my voice barely above a whisper. Why? He looked at me the way he had looked at me 1,000 times across 7 years. That specific look I used to think was love. I understand in that moment what it had always been. Because I can. Not theatrical, not cruel. 3 words said quietly and completely, like the simplest and most obvious answer to the simplest and most obvious question. Like he genuinely couldn't understand why I needed to ask. I'm posting this because I need someone to believe me. I have a psychiatric record that says I'm delusional. I have a husband that everybody likes. I have neighbors who will tell you, sincerely and with genuine concern, that Leo did everything he could. I have a doctor who wrote, "husband concerned" in his notepad before I said a single word. What I have, 1 photograph, 1 small shoe, and myself. Just barely, but enough. I don't know where I am right now. I'm not going to say. I don't know what happens next with Ellie. That part's too raw and too complicated, and I can't write it yet. I know I'm going to get her back. I know that with the same certainty I know she's real. If anyone reading this recognizes what I've described, the small corrections in public, the warmth everyone else sees, the way your own memory starts to feel like the enemy territory, please, trust the thing underneath, the part that's still there. It's still there. The most dangerous person in your life is not the one who learned exactly how you love. The song has 3 lines. It's not much of a melody. I made it up at 4 a.m. in a dark room over a crib, half asleep, not thinking about anything except this small person who needed to hear my voice. She turns toward it. She always turned toward it. That is not something you can gaslight out of a child. She knows her mother. She knows. Wow, so that was part 1 of that story, and we're gonna read part 2 for sure. So yeah, her husband's an absolute psychopath. He was gaslighting her and drugging her, and had everybody fooled. It's actually quite terrifying that it'd be really easy for someone to actually do this. Like, this could actually be a true story. So I had to search a bit for part 2. Here it is. My husband told me we never had a daughter. The terrifying part is that I almost believed him. Part 2. The tap is still running. I want to tell you what happened after. I'm in a motel bathroom. Tap's running. I need the tap running, okay? I need the sound of something normal, because silence is where Leo lives. And I cannot be in silence right now. I can't. 53 hours. That's how long I've been awake. 53. Okay. He said, because I can. That was the answer. To why. To all of it. 8 months of small corrections and moved furniture and missing days and a daughter removed from every surface of my life like she never existed. And that was what he gave me. Because I can. My hand moved before I did. The sound it made was wrong. Too loud. Way too loud for that street at that hour and the neighbors. Sarah and David came to their door. I saw them. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. Just turned his jaw back toward me slowly. Same face. Same nothing face. And said it. Alicia would never have done that. Give me a second. That name. That specific name in his mouth on that street. I need you to understand what that means because I've never, not drunk, not asleep, not in 7 years of marriage, not in the 3 before that, not in any room Leo has ever been in, I have never said that name to him. Never. Not once. Alicia is mine. She's the part of me that existed before Leo. The locked room. The one I was so careful with. I kept her like, I don't know. Like something you cup your hands around so the wind doesn't get it. Was. My voice came out wrong. How do you know that name? He just looked at me. Not angry, not surprised. Just a man for who this is neither new nor interesting. He already knew I'd ask. He already knew what my face would do. He had probably known for years and kept it the way you keep a spare key. Not because you need it now, just because you like knowing the door is yours. I didn't wait for the answer. I'm done. I am done walking through doors Leo built. I am just done. I ran. Shoe in one hand, photo in the other, and I ran the way you run when something animal in you has already decided and your conscious mind is just catching up. I heard Sarah behind me. Lisa, you're not well. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop because every single time I've stopped, it's cost me something. My certainty, my memory, my kitchen floor, my daughter. I looked back once. Leo was standing exactly where I left him, not watching me and not moving. Just standing there with his hands at his sides like a man waiting for a bus. Like a man who isn't worried because he knows the bus is coming. He didn't follow me. That should have felt like something good, but it didn't. I told the officer everything, laid it all out, carefully and in order. The photo, the shoe, the room behind the closet, the notepad with husband concerned written before I said a single word. 8 months of it. I put it all on the desk between us, and I watched his face, and I knew. I already knew. Officer Marsh. He was at our engagement dinner, our housewarming, that charity thing Leo did 2 years ago where I stood making small talk about someone's garden while Leo worked the room, being exactly whatever everyone needed him to be. Officer Marsh, who has shaken Leo's hand. who looked at me across a dinner table once and said, "You're a lucky woman," like he meant it, like it was obvious. Leo wrote my story in his head before I walked through that door. His face? Not unkind, worried actually, genuinely worried. For Leo. My phone lit up on the desk between us. It was Leo. I looked at the phone, I looked at Officer Marsh's face, and I looked at the door. I ran again. I don't know what time it is. I've actually lost track. Ellie's feeding time came and went, I think maybe an hour ago, but maybe more. And I sat on the floor of a bus shelter and just cried. Properly. The kind I haven't let myself do since this started because she is in that cradle, 20 feet from my front door. It's the time of night when she wakes up and reaches for me, and I'm not there. I'm not there. I'm sitting on a bus shelter floor 8 miles away, and I'm not there. I can't use my card. He has access to everything. I had $40 cash in my bag, habit from my mother, something Leo used to call endearing. He called everything endearing. God, and I found this motel and paid in notes, and the man at the desk didn't ask questions, and I think I looked like someone you just don't ask questions of, and that's fine. I'm in the bathroom because the bedroom has a mirror. I'm not ready for the mirror yet. I don't know which face I'd see. He knows about Alicia, which means he went looking, which means before the bookshop, before the smile, before the book held out like a gift, he already knew. He'd already found the locked rooms, the ones I was so careful with, the ones I thought no one could reach because I never let anyone get close enough to even know they existed. Side note, at this point in the story, I'm kind of believing she's crazy, but I don't know if that's just really good writing or, maybe this is Leo's point of view because Leo has got me fooled into thinking she's crazy. But I don't know, man. I gotta keep reading. I don't know what she means to him. I don't know how he found her. I don't know if saying her name was a warning or a promise or just another key he cut before he needed it. Just, Leo always has a just in case. I know what it felt like when he said it. It felt like he'd been standing inside me the whole time, in the part I thought was only mine. The tap is still running. Somewhere in this city, my daughter is waking up and reaching for me. I'm going to sleep now. 2 hours, 3 if I can. Then I'm going to think. Clearly, cleanly, without the pills. Without him. About what happens next. He didn't follow me. He let me run. I've been awake long enough to know that means something. Leo doesn't make unplanned decisions. Leo doesn't let things happen to him. If I'm free tonight, it's because free is useful to him right now. I just don't know what it's useful for yet. The tap is still running. I need it to keep running. Just a little longer. Jeez, that was pretty creepy. I'm really looking forward to reading your guys' take on this, because this story leaves you thinking at the end. It leaves you wondering, is she crazy? Is he crazy? Are they both crazy? This is like next level writing. That was really good.